Everybody's ready? Yep, we'll call the meeting to order.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll get started with approval of the agenda.
Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda with the following amendments. Number one, remove item number C-1, recognition of Ronald McDonald House Pop Tab Challenge winning school. Number two, remove item number C-3, building presentation from Jenny Barker Elementary School. Number three, additional certified and classified personnel actions as presented, item number E-3. Number four, move item number E-4A, sensory materials, to item G3, unfinished business. Move item number E-5-A, math curriculum adoption, to item G4, unfinished business. Move item number E-5-B, foreign language curriculum adoption, to item G/5, unfinished business. Add item number E-5-C, partnership agreement between Jobs for America's graduates and Garden City USD-457. And number 8, add item number H-3, new business, consider ratification of the 2022-2023 negotiated agreement and consider approval of the revised 2022-2023 school calendar. That was a lot.
Do we have a second? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passed. Okay, and we will move on to public comment. Allison Amos, and if I say your name's wrong, I apologize.
I'm Allie Amos. I'm a teacher at AP Hubert. I'm just finishing up my 10th year for the district in the same school, same position for the most part. And I just wanted to talk to you guys today about reconsidering your approval of the last part of your agenda there, number 8, the ratification of the new calendar. Last year, it seemed like we had multiple Zoom meetings where we could attend and ask questions, and that didn't really seem to happen this year. With the same agreement, it didn't pass last year. This year, it seemed kind of like hidden or pushed under. We didn't have a lot of time to vote, and the email for us to vote was sent like after school hours anyway. My part against it is just adding more time to our school day. At AP Hubert, I mean, we have a huge population of kids who are struggling already with social emotional, with financial issues, like everything. And I just don't believe that adding 20 more minutes onto our day is going to be something that's going to help them. With transportation, the elementary schools will probably all be the same. I think it was pushed back where our end time would be 4:10, which is what our teachers' end time is now. Which leaves us teachers then dismissing kids at 4:10. By the time we get back to our classrooms already, we're spending 10 to 15 minutes outside dismissing our kids. Then we have staff meetings and everything, so it just pushes us all back. And maybe because I'm pregnant, but getting to appointments is already an impossible task. The latest appointments most places do is 3:30, 3. So we're either taking a half day just to go to an appointment, or the school is finding someone to fill in for us. The 20-minute time is going to be used for helping academic success. Right now, we already have about 140 minutes for reading and 90 minutes for math, which is above our time for both. Our math curriculum can be taught in 60 minutes and we're doing it in 90 already. So we have time to do different activities with the kids, whether we need to enrich them or we need to catch them up. So that was one of the things, you know, we're adding on to that time. Well, now we're just saying, okay, we're still not there, so let's take more time to do it. As an elementary teacher, I think it's even more difficult for us because of all of our duties. We only have our hour plan time. I mean, we're struggling to get by what we're supposed to get done anyway. And now we're going to be asked to plan one more thing on top of that. I know that our district has been wanting to get closer to what Holcomb has for their schedule is starting later. Right now, they go 15 minutes longer than us, and we're trying to add 20. And they still have a shorter yearly schedule than we do. So in comparison, if that's what we're trying to get to, we're not quite there yet. On the voting, only 305 certified staff voted, and we have about 574 certified staff total. So I know that it passed because it was a little over half. 344 of those certified staff members are pre-K 6. And that's where a lot of this falls on. Like, I feel as an elementary teacher, it's going to affect me more than it's going to the middle school or the high school. So I just wanted to see if you guys would reconsider that and hear from my perspective where we're coming from. And if you had any questions, I know it's later on in the agenda, but I would like to speak to that as a teacher. Oh,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Betsy Lobmeyer?
Hello, I'm Betsy Lobmeyer, and I have been a teacher in the district for 21 years, but I resigned just for family reasons. So now I'm talking to you only as a parent. And I know that this is a thankless job. So thank you for doing it, because nobody ever likes what you're doing, but we need you. So thank you for that. So I'll have a kindergartner, a second grader, a fourth grader, a sixth grader, and a senior next year. And I want you to think about adding 20 minutes to their day. So first, we want the school year to be shorter, right? Because the kids are going to school too long. I'm in favor of that entirely. Kansas has, only Wisconsin beats us as far as the number of minutes and hours required in the year. So Kansas is way up here. And our district right now is going 80 hours beyond that. So there's room to take some days off the schedule without adding time to their day, which is the most important thing I want you to think about. These kids are gonna leave their houses before 8 in the morning, and then they're gonna get home, after 4:30. A lot of our kids are on the bus. That entire time, they're managed. And they have to be, because there's a lot of kids, right? We're telling them where to go and where to sit and what to talk about and what to think and what to do. And they get 2 little recesses and they get lunch where they're told where to sit. And if they can talk and if they're too loud, then they can't talk. As adults, we would never tolerate it to be gone a full work day and to be told what to do every minute. And we're asking it out of our little kids, little bitty kids. And then on top of that, the job that they do all day long is not a job that they feel comfortable doing all the time. It's not something that they've been doing for years that they know exactly how to do it. Every day, in every different subject, we're saying, I need you to learn something new. Push a little bit harder. Try, focus, be engaged. We're going to talk about this now, and then we're going to talk about this now. And when you stand in the hall, you're not with your friends, you're quiet and you're in a line. It's just a lot. And they're little. And they deserve some time to play. And giving them more time in school is not going to help, I don't think. They're not little machines that we can just plug in 20 minutes extra and get that much more output. They're people. They're little people. So just think about that.
Johnny? I'm gonna say your name wrong.
You said it right.
Okay, and your last name?
Porsche.
Porsche. I was gonna be close. I got myself in my font. So thank you for coming.
So you might know me as the teacher that made a comment on a textbook last meeting. Some teachers or some other people know me as like a coach or a teacher, just depending on where they've seen me. To my students, I'm usually just Miss. Either Miss Casper, coach, now Mrs. Horsch, but usually just Miss. And as a social studies teacher to 7th graders, I get a lot of big questions. These big questions are sometimes like, why do we need history? Where are other countries, or what even are other countries sometimes? Why do we vote? How do other countries do things, do anything? Or really important ones like, why do some people like chicken strips when they could have chicken nuggets? Big questions. I love getting these questions and having an opportunity to help the students like guide their own learning. That's usually my goal. I show them how to look for official sources, different ways they can teach, different ways they can learn together as a group, because we always learn things as a group. I don't feel like the current board understands that teachers' goals are actually for every student to become free-thinking, competent adults. That's really all we want at the end of the day. And I think that that's what most parents would like as well. Well, teachers around the country are being accused of indoctrinating kids with CRT, and I'm not saying you guys are doing that, but it is happening around the US as we speak now. And I fear that our current board is having similar thoughts about teachers' relationship with CRT or critical race theory, if anybody's curious. States like Indiana, like I said, have already moved towards that, and they're actually seeing a lot less teachers because teachers are leaving the profession. Teachers don't want these strict confines to teach what we teach. I teach geography and Kansas history. And as we know, Kansas history, it usually has Bleeding Kansas. We talk about John Brown. We just did a big John Brown unit. The state assessment expects us to do claim evidence reasoning, teaching kids how to come up with a claim on their own and how to back that up with their own evidence and reasoning. And I think that that's great. It's a new, awesome way to teach kids how to teach themselves and how to learn things from their environment. Now, Indiana, like I said, is having a teacher shortage. I know we're also having a teacher shortage. And I don't think the right way is to confine teachers more by worrying about things like CRT and textbooks. Oftentimes we use textbooks as helpers, but they're not our main source of material, like every single day. We often look at articles, we look at things that are published. I usually post those on Google Classroom for my kids or print them off for kids that don't have iPads. I worry about kids reading that and understanding and getting their own opinions from that, not stressing about making sure that I crossed my T's and dotted my I's and just made sure that it was absolutely perfect and didn't mention any type of other culture so that I didn't get in trouble. I don't want to have to worry about that. I want to make sure my students can think for themselves and read an article. And if they disagree, find another article that agrees with your opinion. That's usually what I tell them. I don't tell them this is the only article you can read. If they have further questions, I say, go look it up. We've got the internet at our hands today. Go find out. I just show them where the better places to look are. Maybe not Reddit, maybe not Google Images like most kids search for things. Now, to clear things up about CRT and what exactly that is, according to NPR, it examines the impact of a systematic racism on American law and institutions. And it's taught in some university programs. It's not in schools. It's not something that the textbook really addresses. Yes, it addresses other cultures and how other people live, but that's important for them to know. There's a whole world out there for them to explore. They just have to know how to do it. And about the indoctrinating kids with CRT, if I could indoctrinate kids, I would make them turn in their assignments, and I still have kids failing just because they won't turn anything in, not because they're not smart. They just don't do everything we want them to do, and that's what kids do. They don't listen very well sometimes. So the board's worried about CRT and really any format it feels like, and that feels like that's all we've worried about. Like the whole textbook conversation last time, I didn't clock it, but it felt like a long time to talk about adopting a textbook. So if you want to help teachers, give us more para support, help us like in different ways, don't micromanage us. Many say that great leaders have the wisdom to give their team the freedom to produce great work because it makes no sense to recruit the best and micromanage their work. So don't micromanage us, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have recognition on the agenda.
Linda, are you gonna?
Good evening. Tonight we're going to recognize 3 schools that have won awards for social, emotional, and character development. The awards come from KSDE and Smoky Hills, and they center around different initiatives. Specifically, the initiatives for these awards are shifting school culture. And so those schools that are recognized for shifting school culture have to have a social, emotional, character development program for at least 1 year. As well as growing student skills in these areas.
They must support the standards and the KISA goals for the district. The second award is called Enhanced Spotlight, and it is for districts that are implementing new initiatives. They also have to be improving the social emotional skills of the students, as well as following the KISA process. So we had 3 schools that won. So I'm going to ask those schools to come up one at a time and introduce the folks that are here from those schools, introduce themselves and tell you just a little bit about what they presented to get their awards. So the first one I'm going to call is Alta Brown. They win for shifting school culture, and the program is called Dragons on Fire. So we'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they're doing.
Good evening. I'm Julie Copridge. I'm the principal at Alta Brown.
I'm Caitlin Sotillo. I teach self-contained kindergarten at Alta Brown.
And for several years, we have had a motto at Alta Brown. We call it Dragons on Fire. Fire stands for, what does fire stand for?
Fair and
caring,
inspiring others,
respectful and responsible, excited to learn. And so everything that we do, if you'd caught me after the flag salute, it'd have been no problem. You put me on the
It was
spot.
really hard not to do the fire chant after the Pledge of Allegiance.
So what we do at Alta Brown is we give out fire slips to our kids, and they can earn fire slips based on those characteristics that we say in our pledge each morning. And then at the end of the week, the teachers turn in their fire slips to the office, and then we draw out a winner from each class. And we recognize them by sending home a yard sign. So I don't know if you've seen any yard signs around in our community, but it's a fire yard sign that the kids put in their yards. So that's one of the things we do. Would you like to talk about champs or anything else?
Around the same time, we also put together champs and set guidelines across the whole building so that we could be consistent and have consistent expectations for the kids, so the kids knew exactly what they needed to do, where, and how to do it. So we decided as a team exactly what the expectations were in every area of the building, from the hallways, the bathrooms, the cafeteria, the bus line, dismissal, in our classrooms. And we have consistent signage that shows the kids exactly what the expectation is in each area. For all of those areas.
We also do character counts, also ties into that, where we have 6 pillars of character. And each month we focus on one of those pillars. And at the end of the month, the students are chosen based on their attributes that they have towards that pillar. And then they get to eat lunch with the counselor. And sometimes if we can get community members, policemen, firemen, those types of people come in and eat lunch with them as well. So, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Thank you. Questions for Alta Brown?
Awesome, that's great. Like it, Dragons on Fire. That's
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
The next school is Georgia Matthews, and they won an Enhanced Spotlight recognition for their morning announcements initiative. And I know Mrs. Kent isn't here, but I think we have a couple of their staff here today to talk to you on her behalf. And theirs.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Slavic. I loop K1 and this year I'm in kindergarten.
I'm Danica Kitch and I run the behavior program.
So before COVID, we used to always do our morning announcements in the gym with all of the kids. As they came in, they would eat breakfast, they'd have a seat on the gym floors in their lines for their classes, and then our principal would get up and we'd do morning announcements. And then when COVID hit and we could no longer all be in the gym, we switched to a Zoom format. And we decided this year, even though we still can be in the same space, we decided to keep the Zoom format. And it's been really cool because the kids are so much more engaged. So we get our kids from the gym, we go to the classrooms and we have Zoom up on our whiteboards. And so they can see all the kids in the school, they can see Mrs. Kent doing morning announcements, but they're able to watch everyone and they seem much more invested in it. But one huge thing that we've done this year is students can submit shout outs, jokes of the day, And then if they have any like fun
Trivia.
facts that they want to share, they can go up, and we have a little table at the front of our school where they can go and fill those out. And sometimes they'll submit shout outs to other teachers, sometimes to other kids if they help them on the playground or if they help them with their math or whatever it is. And then they get to do those jokes of the day. And then one thing we recently added was little drawings that they can do. And so it's the starting of a drawing. So it'll say it's not a heart and it'll have half of a heart, it's a, and they have to finish it into something else. And so then we show those on morning announcements every morning, and they get to have their work displayed for everybody else. And I think even our low academic students feel like they can accomplish something and still get recognized for that. And then we also have our goals that all of our students have. And so each of our students at Georgia Matthews has a reading and a math goal that they're working towards every 9 weeks. And so as they meet their goals, then we give them a shout out on morning announcements as well.
Yep, and at the beginning of the year, Mrs. Kent, because we were doing Zoom, she would go, "Where's Mrs. Kent?" And the kids would have to guess like what location in the building. We've run out of locations. But it was kind of fun because the kids then would have to be the first ones to unmute and shout their answer, and then they would get kind of recognized for that, so.
And anytime she's not in the building, so obviously she's on maternity leave right now. So our class has been doing it a lot, but any class can go and lead morning announcements. And so a lot of students will have a part in morning announcements as well. They'll get to read off the lunch menu. They'll get to read off the weather or different things that they want to share out for the day. So, yeah.
Any questions for Georgia Matthews?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
And our third recognition is for Garden City Achieve. They have an enhanced spotlight recognition for Rise Up Expecting Success. So we'll let them come up and talk to you a little bit. While they're coming up, I will tell you that all of these folks will be recognized on May 17th. It's a virtual recognition ceremony. So it will be on Facebook and Twitter. And then they will get a video that they will be able to showcase themselves on their school websites.
I'm Lucas Sullivan, I'm principal at Garden City Achieve. This is Christina Yonkman, our lead teacher at the high school and also the school counselor for Achieve. And then also I'd like to credit Diane Elliott. She's really the one that kind of pushed us to sign up for this or apply for this award, our social emotional liaison for the district, but she's also part of our building leadership team. So the initiative was Rise Up, and a lot of it is just the changing the culture, whether it was the name change or changing the logo, getting gear in students' hands, just making students proud of being part of our building, whether they're in the day school, the TEP, the virtual academy, or at Achieve High School. You know, if you guys were there for the graduation, you could see that positive momentum. The cool thing that I saw at the graduation, there were so many underclassmen there that were excited about seeing their peers graduate. So just getting that positive momentum going. Another thing that we talked about was cohesion. Just having the same start and stop time for teachers in our building allows them to help out. We can do things between the therapeutic school and the high school. We had people sub from the high school for the TEP, and then just bringing things that every other school has, like a pop machine or a bike rack or a loading zone for a bus or a playground that I hope is coming soon. So those type of things, though, are a lot just of the Rise Up. And also, I'll have Mrs. Yonkman just touch on some of our how active our Stuco has been this year.
Yes, we've had an amazing group this year. They concentrated a lot on community service. And so one of the projects they did was had received some spa kits. Well, they were supplies, and they created spa kits, and we donated those to the Cancer Center and also to the Women's Shelter. What's it called?
Family crisis.
Family Crisis, thank you. Another thing that they did, we did a building-wide project around Fall Fest. Our Stuco planned a Fall Fest for the TEP students. And so then our TEP students got to come over to our side of the building, and it was the whole building working together as one during Fall Fest. We also did some things where we donated, they did some fundraisers, and we donated to a para who had lost her husband and a daughter.
and she had been ill. We also had a student that was taking cancer treatments, and we had a raffle for them. So we just did a lot of outreach and community service. In fact, it was Valentine's Day, and I looked at the kids and Stu and I said, you guys have been doing so much for everybody else. You guys haven't even done anything fun as a group for yourself. So, but they were awesome. And we're down now to 3. We graduated all the other students. So they're going to be recruiting for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief?
I guess I just want to say to all 3 of your groups, thank you so much. And it's, you mentioned the small things, and I think it's when you do these small things, they don't seem like a big deal in the big scheme of things, but how those small things are so important, and just recognizing that, you know, it does make a difference, and going that extra mile. I know it takes time and effort to come up with these small things that really make a child feel important or a student feel important. And I'm just in awe of what you guys do. Ooh, I might get emotional at the end of this school year. But I congratulations, it's much deserved. I'm glad that you're getting recognized, and I'm just so thankful for all of you and the time that you take. It is obvious when we go see your students, the culture that you are creating when we go into your building. So thank you.
If we could give them a round of applause. This was a competition. You know, do quite a process and apply for these awards or these recognitions. Thank you.
Any correspondence? We'll move to the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed. We will move on to our board goals update. Individual plans of study.
Mary, it's on the computer.
Okay.
The presentation is PowerPoint. Thank you.
Okay, hi, I'm Mary Guyman. I'm the counselor at Horace Good Middle School. And today we're talking about the individual plan of study. Counselors and teachers meet with students throughout the school year to work on their individual plan of study. We call it the IPS. Both classroom and mentoring time is utilized, and staff are trained and are also provided access to the Zello program. And then here you can see that we've divided up the different things for 7th and 8th grade. So for example, there's the career assessment, and then we have the career and educational planning, career related activities, and the lessons. So there's something different for both grades, for 7th grade and 8th grade. And during the middle school time, it's called exploration. We want students to explore and to make those connections. Career fair this year, we're lucky, and so both schools are having a career fair. Last week, KH had theirs. This Friday, we will have ours. And so we do look at the students' career choices, and then we invite people in our community to present to our students. And students tomorrow in our building, they're going to select 3 speakers to attend their presentation. Parent involvement. So this year is different because we had students deliver their IPS to their parents during second semester, and the students had to come back. Either they did it on their iPad or did it during parent-teacher conference time So we had a really positive turnout. Both middle schools had at least 80% parent participation, so that was really good. And so here, parents were notified about Zello via email, social media, and letters were sent home. This year, Zello had a parent portal for parents to access their student IPS information. Parent access is emailed to their parents to allow them to regularly monitor their child's IPS, and students will present their IPS to their parents in person during parent-teacher conferences or virtually. Data collection. So at the end of first semester, that is our job as counselors. We monitor the students' IPSs, and during the second semester, we ensure that students have 90% of their IPSs completed. And success this year, 97% of students have completed their individual plan of study at Horace Good, and 98% have completed their individual plan of study at KH. This will be our first year to have parent-teacher IPS conferences with the mentoring teachers.
Okay, so Steve Nordby, the principal at the high school. We use a lot of the same processes that they do at the middle school. For us, we have a variety of monthly activities that they start in October and then run throughout the school year. Each month, there's a different activity, a different lesson, something else going on. Some take place in mentoring time and others take place in core classes where we want all the freshmen to be doing something. We'll do it during freshman biology because everyone takes biology class. Sophomores, world history, they do the activity. So in the 9th grade, the big objective is kids to learn about themselves, what they're good at, what they're interested in. And so each month, those lessons kind of build towards that. And then we also in February, this is our 3rd year of turning our spring conferences into a discussion of plans of study. And it was a little rough the first couple of, last year especially, having to do them all virtually. This year we kind of had the option. And for those that couldn't come in the spring conference, we had them sign off on a piece of paper that we shared. We looked through it with our student at home. And so we wanted to get as many parents as we could seeing what was in their students in an individual plan of study. So as I said, freshman year, it's all about learning about themselves, what they're interested in, what academy they might want to enroll in as a sophomore, things like that. Then the 10th grade year, it's about what types of jobs are out there, what types of employers are out there, what kind of skills might be needed for the jobs that you think you're interested in. That's really the focus in 10th grade. 11th grade, then we start talking about, I know what I'm interested, I know what jobs might be out there, where do I go get training? So our 11th graders in October go to college planning conference. They start looking at tech schools, they start looking at 2-year schools, 4-year schools. They start looking at what other kind of certificates might be out there that they can earn. They start putting it all together as a junior. And then start talking about, well, if I'm in this job, what does that career really demand of me? What are the hours, for instance? If I want to be a doctor, well, what does that mean? If I want to be a plumber, okay, well, what does that mean? And so they start talking about those demands of the careers. And then you'll notice each of these grades has an activity all the way through May. Yeah, all right, we have an activity in May talking about, okay, what's your summer strategy to get some experience? Are you going to get a part-time job, or what could you do to build up your resume, for lack of a better word, something you can put on a job application? What's your summer plan? Seniors, it's a little bit different schedule. We try to get all of the senior activities done in the fall because about a quarter or more of our seniors leave us in December. We have over 100 kids graduate early, move on, they start college, they start work, whatever. So in the senior, it's about putting it together and taking that step. They attend the college planning conference also, but then we also spend a lot of October encouraging them to apply to different schools, different training opportunities. There's the senior parent conferences that you have with with counselors talking about where you're at, where you want to be, what do you need to get where you want to be. And so we wrap that up in the fall of the senior year. And those that are still attending through the spring, they participate in the IPS conferences too. When my daughter did her IPS conference in her senior year, it was about, her teacher had a college checklist for her because she knew that's where Reagan wanted to go. So have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? Do you have this? And we turned that spring parent teacher conference into that kind of a discussion. So each year then, the state has a rubric that they put out about plan of studies, talking about, okay, here's something that has to be included in a student's plan of study, and then allowing you to rate yourself on that rubric all the way from just starting to doing it exemplary. And so we take a look at that rubric. We look at our activities, we see how we met the rubric and what we might want to do to change our practices, what we might want to add, some things we might want to do different. And then we also take a look at our post-secondary success report from KSDE. Mr. Meng talked to the board about that in October, where we added some programs, we added some certification opportunities because we saw that our post-secondary success numbers in certain areas, well, needed some improvement. They kind of remained flat, and we wanted to give kids more opportunities. So we do take a look at that kind of data, and then we'll do that again this summer. After graduation, we'll sit down with the counselors, we'll go through the IPS rubric. One thing that we know that we need to work on is that to be an exemplary school in the area of the parent contact, you're supposed to have 2 opportunities per year for parents to look at their students' individual plan of study. And for the last 3 years, we've had 1 at the high school. So we have to, that's one of our objectives, is to take a look and see how do we get the second one built in. And so that's an example of kind of what we do with it. That's what I got.
Question.
Yep.
So when you talk about the KSDE rubric, does that include the time frame in which all these different topics are discussed?
No, it just says to have a plan of study that's beginning. I can't remember the language that they use. You have to do these type of activities during the school year. And then to have one that's exemplary or modeling, I think they call it, you have to be doing these things. And so, for instance, that parent engagement piece, to be modeling, you have to have 2 opportunities. And right now, we're implementing it. That's the step just below, because we have 1. So on the rubric, we kind of judge ourselves 3 out of 4 in providing parent opportunities. It doesn't give you a time frame to say these have to be done by a certain time.
I guess I'll give you an example of what I'm
Yeah.
thinking about. My daughter is an 8th grader. And I was looking where you have kind of like the resume kind of talking about jobs, and it's a little bit later on, but she's gonna do an interview coming up. So I'm just wondering, do they tell you what year, academic year, like those things need to be taught, or is there some flexibility with that?
There's flexibility.
There is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, they're just saying they have to be exposed to it sometime during their career.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We have employability skills at our school, and so in that class, they teach them about doing a resume.
Yeah.
So that is addressed.
For us, it's usually, they do it as part of the English 3, I think, curriculum. They do it as part of their junior year. But in high school, it's something that's kind of been a natural part of our English 3 curriculum. So we just built that part in. Every student has to take English 3. So every student has to goes through and gets that resume experience. Yeah.
And I guess just knowing that it's existing, I think some of it, and we as parents can access that as well. So maybe using that as a tool to get them to do it earlier or whatever that might be. Thank you.
I think this is great. I feel like it probably helps a lot of kids to kind of get some direction on where they want to go. I was just wondering, I know when I was growing up in college, there's a lot of major changes. Have we followed up with the kids that have gone on to college to see if this has helped them to be guided to know where they need to be in that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because, yeah, I think I changed my major twice. And so Yeah, no, we haven't. And that's something, that's data that'd be really interesting to look at. We're new enough in the process. I mean, like I said, this is kind of our third year of really we've done the IPS stuff for more than that, but our third year of sharing with parents and jumping into that rubric that, yeah, we just haven't had a chance to collect that information. It'd be interesting though. Yeah, raise your hand in here, professionals, if you changed your major. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we will move on to unfinished business and discussion of the board vacancy. I believe you guys had a little bit of discussion on that at the last meeting. Tonight we have a timeline to look at if you guys are wanting to fill that spot and go through an appointment process for that. You guys have any questions or you want to go over the timeline and discussion?
I think this looks great. That it's laid out pretty clearly. Thank you for doing that for us.
So if that's something that we want to make a motion on and do tonight, that would, we'd have our discussion and approve that appointment process today. And that then on May 10th, we could begin advertising it. So the questionnaire would be submitted or put out there. Is that the way?
Yeah, so for benefit of the people that don't have this in front of them, is it okay if I kind
Yes,
of go over that?
go ahead.
So the proposed timeline would be May 9th to discuss and approve the appointment process and the questions for questionnaire. May 10th through May 27th would be to advertise and accept questionnaires. So we would use our website and our social media options to put information out that the board is going to use this time frame to try to fill the vacancy. May 31st, the questionnaires would be opened at the same time. So they'd be submitted in writing, sealed in a sealed envelope. We would hang on to those. Stephanie will hang on to those. May 31st, those would be opened and then copies distributed to all the board members. And then at your June 6th meeting, it would be up to you to select and appoint that seventh board member. The questions wouldn't be secret. I mean, somebody wanted to ask what are the questions going to be, I'm going to have to fill out. They certainly could know that, and you could discuss the questions here tonight. So, but the sealing those and open them at the same time prevents somebody from gaining an advantage of knowing how others have answered the questionnaire. So maybe doing it in writing might have some advantages over doing an in-person interview kind of process. I think we've had 6 people who have inquired. We would reach out to those 6, apprise them of the process that's been approved, and if they were interested in taking the questionnaire, and they just have to have it returned by the May 27th, right? So a couple of suggestions on the questionnaire. I put a little bit of a limit to the length of the responses. And I gave you 3 sample questions. Why do you want to be on the school board? Describe your background and the qualifications you have to be a school board member. And what do you believe is the most important issue affecting our school system? So certainly if you have other ideas for questions, or you don't like one or all of these, you can come up with whatever questions that you would like, but and then a 2-page total limit to be able to respond, because you guys will get to read all of those. And so that's kind of the proposal. So if you approve that tonight, then I suggest you finalize the questions that you want to have tonight, because we would want to be able to start providing that to people starting tomorrow.
And just to be clear, so we would reach out to the 6 that sent in interest previously, but we would also advertise it starting tomorrow. So that way other people have the opportunity to also fill out the questionnaire and show their interest for the position as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you. You explained that much better than what I had practiced in my head. Even though we discussed it. Yeah, so I guess the process for us tonight is if we do want to go ahead with this, I believe that we could approve the timeline and the questions in one motion. We just need to decide if we're happy with the questions that we've been given, or if we would like to add to that. You guys had something in mind that you think would be a good question? And I can even read these if they're gonna go out tomorrow. So if they're like, they need to hear them now, I can do that. It's up to you.
I like these questions. I think they're good and they're not too technical. They're somewhat basic, but I think we get a good feel for.
The 2-page limit seems. Do you want me to read them just so they're out, or if people want to ask for them, they can just ask for them once they'll be out tomorrow?
Go for it.
Okay. So the questions that we're looking at is, why do you want to be on the school board? Describe your background and qualifications you have to be a school board member. And what do you believe is the most important issue affecting our school system? I feel like those are all questions. How they could be an asset to our board, I guess is. If that's something, yeah, if that's something you want to move forward with, we'll just need a motion tonight and.
I move that we approve the proposed board vacancy timeline and the questions presented. Second.
Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passed. I don't like to see that. Sorry. Next, we have the discussion of request for proposals for the superintendent transition report. And I believe Jennifer Cunningham visited with you guys at the last meeting about this a little bit. I tried to listen in, and we're still figuring out technology. So I don't know if there's anything you guys want to. I believe it's all the same except for the date change. Okay. And maybe just a little cleanup in there. And Dr. Dominguez has seen this and is supportive of some of the changes in what we're proposing. So it's based on your discussion last time. I'm not really sure.
Can you give more detail on all the benefits?
Not specifically to me. That's why I wish I could have heard more of the discussion last week, so, or last meeting, so I knew more of that. I don't want to sway anyone else's opinion. I really wish I could have heard last meeting's conversation. It's something that I think would be an asset. I know it costs some money, but just to get some outside eyes, maybe even some information as a board for us to see as we're going into our new 5-year plan. But I'm supportive of whatever the rest of the board would like too, so.
I mean, that was my kind of feeling as well. Just it's always good to get a non-biased third set of eyes on something. I mean, sometimes when you've been doing something for a while, or we may not see things that other people might see, and I think it would give some good information perhaps. And if Dr. Dominguez feels like this would be a good thing for his transition, I'm supportive of that.
I agree. I worry that it puts out the impression that either he or whatever group we have do this or us are looking for things that the district's doing wrong or in the negative. But I really hope that if we go with this, it brings out some positives that maybe are our strengths that, oh, we don't want to change that. Or maybe new leadership is looking to change that. And this would bring out, oh, well, we don't want to change that because that really is one of our strengths in our district. I just don't want it to be looked at as someone coming in and looking for all the wrongs that we need to right or things like that. And there may be some weaknesses in there that things that need change. But I predict it shows a lot of strengths in our district too. some things that we really need to stick with. So that's my goal for this type of report.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm glad you verbalized that because I think sometimes you can get nervous about those kinds of things that I 100% agree. Like, it's to see what's good and what we know we're doing right, and in balance with what we can do better, so.
And so if we approve this tonight, we would request for proposals immediately tomorrow. And then the deadline for those proposals would be May 20th, and then we choose at the next.
Can we ask, when we ask the proposals, that they submit like a reference or something of someone that's done this and that?
I think there's,
We got
says
three.
three
References. Okay, great, perfect. I think that was Mark's kind of.
That was
reservation, was, this is not normally done. Thank you. So, some successes, I think that would help.
I got the idea that they were done sometimes when there was a new employee coming in from a different state or new administrator. Is that? Okay. Then if they weren't, okay. Any other questions or discussion on that?
Madam President, I move that we approve the proposal for superintendent, the request for proposals for superintendent transition report.
For a second? Any other discussion? No. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And we will move on to the sensory materials. Some questions or discussion that we wanted to have on those? Is there any more information?
We asked Mr. Guyman to come tonight just to answer. any
Okay, I
questions.
appreciate it. I just wasn't expecting you to be here, but thank you.
So
I
yeah,
wasn't
whatever,
trying to leave you out.
no worries. Whatever questions you all have. Just a little bit about the process. So this went through, this was through the first round of ESSER funding. It went through last summer. I did the proposal for it then and it was approved. And so it's just taken some time to get all of the logistics worked out. And so we basically, after we got approval and we had the funding lined up, I got with the principals and had them select the materials that they felt like would be best for their building. Every building's gonna look totally different based on size, what your needs are. You know, VO with our rise room out there is gonna have a different need than what Jenny Barker would need, and space-wise, it's gonna look different too. And so principals kind of selected materials that they felt like would benefit the kiddos and also would work in the space that they had available for them. So that's kind of our plan. A little bit about the reasoning for it, I guess. That's probably a question I'm sure that you have. Really, we're seeing a pretty significant increase in behaviors since we've come back from COVID. I think Glenda can probably attest that she's done more expulsion hearings this year than we've ever done. We're seeing a lot of our, especially our younger kiddos coming in, having trouble with self-regulation and being able to regulate. And when they get agitated and they get that way, it's hard for us to get them down. And so this is, to me, this is a proactive way to try to address some of that so that it doesn't end up being a discipline issue. So if we can teach them that they use these materials to regulate themselves and calm down, then that'll get them in the classroom and prevent some of the discipline issues that we're dealing with. Is kind of our hope. Mel's really kind of the expert on this, more so than I am. So is there anything that I'm missing?
Pretty much.
Okay. Is there a time, like a professional development or an in-service or something where they are taught some of the different ways to use the sensory? Sometimes I know there's so much out there, it can be overwhelming, I'm sure, even for staff in terms of how to use things, what they're getting. I mean, there's just so many different behavioral things,
Sure.
and models and responses.
And the company Fun and Function is supposed to be providing some professional development for us. So it can be tailored to, I know we have a couple of buildings that are doing actual sensory rooms. So those buildings might have a little bit different training than some of the other buildings that might just have a more generalized training on how to handle, behaviors and work with the different materials that they've purchased. Is there a breakdown we can see of what buildings requested what?
I brought that with me.
When you say sensory rooms, what, can you just describe that?
So I can show you some, I brought some pictures too. It's not in here, but I do have it on a PowerPoint. If you just a second, I can kind of show you some of the things. And I just picked like 4 or 5 pictures to kind of give you a general idea of what it would look like. Yes, sir. So as you're looking on there, I tried to put the name of it on there. This is the sensory cocoon. And so for a lot of our kiddos, as they get escalated and they're real agitated, or we have a lot of kids that are dealing with anxiety and things like that. And so this would just be an opportunity for them to kind of go and sit, and the bubble lights and things like that it has a soothing effect. There's a lot of research behind that to show that kind of helps de-escalate. So that would be the sensory cocoon as you look on there. This one is probably the most popular one. We had a lot of buildings that ordered the chill cave, it's called, and it's just a variety of different things. And so when we talk about sensory materials, there's different kinds of sensory. So there's deep pressure sensory, there's,
Well, there's active, like the swings and stuff like that.
yeah. And so this kind of covers just a little bit of everything. It kind of gives them a variety of things. So the swing for our kiddos, it'll help calm them. The tube that you see there is confining a lot of kiddos like that tight confined space. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what that looks like. And then this is just another example of the iris bubble tube. I think this is actually going to one of the middle schools. I think Horse Good ordered that, but that would just be in the counselor's office. So when the kids went in there, if they needed some time to de-escalate and kind of come down when they're having a moment. And then this one, I believe, we've got 3 or 4 schools that are doing this one. This is the Sensisoft Music Touch Wall. And so it's really interactive. And so I wish I had video of this. It's really cool, but you can kind of go up and as you touch it, the lights move and it makes different sounds. And so it's just to kind of occupy the kiddos when they're escalated, to kind of get their focus on something besides being upset at that time. And that's I guess some examples.
You say there's a lot of kids needing this. What's a lot? I think it just depends on the building.
Yeah, it depends on the building.
At the preschool level, we have some kids that they just can't handle being in the classroom. They get overstimulated. And so we take them to our sensory room. We have a little trampoline. Sometimes they just need to bounce. And then we have some other different calming things that they can do in there too. Usually it only takes a few minutes and then they're able to go back and then focus on the lesson that they're doing.
And I think that's our goal, is to do this up front and hopefully reduce the need for that as time goes on for individual students. My plan is to put up like each building will have a QR code. And so whatever adult takes that kiddo to that area, they'll hit the QR code and they'll put the time that they went in and the time that they went out. So we'll be able to kind of collect data on how many students are utilizing it, how long they're utilizing it for. Are we seeing a reduction in specific students? I think this would play in really well. We're writing a lot more behavior plans this year than we've written in the past. And so I think this would also help. This would be another avenue for us to write into the behavior plan for specific students, that they would have access to that and they would utilize that.
And the dollars here, do they match up the bigger needs in the different schools, or?
I think so. Yes, like the TEP is the one that we're spending the most money on, because that's really where we probably have the biggest need, I think, is at the TEP. And we're trying to create an actual sensory room there for our kiddos. And I think that's going to get used a lot more there than it probably would in any building. So yes, I think If you look at VO, it's probably one of the bigger dollar buildings, and it's got our rise room. Alta Brown has our self-contained room where we have higher needs kiddos there. They have a bigger ticket item. A lot of it, sometimes the dollar signs don't always equate because it's gonna depend on space. You know, if I don't have room for some of the bigger items, then that would be why. I know like Suzette Goldsby out at Plymel, she and I talked, she just doesn't have. So her sensory, she's gonna have a sensory corner, and it's actually gonna be in her office, I think is her plan for where that will be. So it will look totally different at Plymel than it will like at the TEP, just because space too is gonna be an issue.
And this is all Esther's funds.
This is all Esther's funds, yes. One-time cost, and so
We're not gonna have this.
if things need to be replaced, or we've already got a lot of schools that have started building sensory rooms with funds that they've gotten, things like that. And so some of them will be a lower cost there too, because they may not need as much for their buildings. But in my mind, I envision that the buildings will have to figure out how to allocate funds if they want to continue to build on what we're doing. But this is a one-time cost for us. And honestly, I felt like this was, excuse me, this is something that I've always wanted to do. And I've always felt like there was a need. When I was the principal at Garfield with Mel, we really wanted it, but the materials are just really expensive. And so with us having the Esther's funds and having that money is available, that's why I did the proposal, because I felt like this would probably be one of the only times we'd actually be able to do that for all of the buildings.
So my question is, this company and these particular tools, are they given reviews and those kinds of things? Because what worries me is like, you always have like something that sounds really good and it sounds really cool, but it doesn't work with for whatever reason across the board, you know what I mean? So do these, because these are high price items, some of these, and I think we're not just putting them in one or two buildings to try them out and see if they work. Like for example, the chill cave, several schools want that. And I'm just wondering, what if we spend this amount of money, but we don't know if that's really gonna do what we want it to do with our students?
Well, I will tell you that we already have some of those materials. So like if you look at the chill cave, like the swings, we have those in a lot of our buildings, our classrooms already. We have
Some of the light tubes as well.
Yeah, we have some of the light tubes. We have some of those materials already out there. The fiber optic lights that you see like here, we have those in small places, and we have seen success. Years ago, Melanie and I went with all of our staff at Garfield, and we went to Wichita to little early childhood center in Wichita, which is, they're very similar to us. And we when we were there, we asked, we got to go around and see, and they had sensory rooms there, and we got to see, you know, how it worked in their classrooms too. So I think we've seen that, we've seen the benefit of that for sure.
And the company that we ordered from, they are all occupational therapists, so they specialize in sensory rooms and the different kinds of sensory needs people might have, so it's all research based.
This is really becoming pretty popular. There's actually, they'll have sensory rooms in airports, ball fields, hospitals, a lot of places where there's I don't like being around big crowds, and so people get anxious around that, and so that gives them an opportunity to go and kind of decompress before they, you know, so they can kind of go back and join the group. And so this is becoming something that's becoming more and more common.
So do you find that our bigger schools have more of the behavioral issues than our smaller schools? And let me tell you why I'm asking you that, and if this correlates in any way, because you know it feels I hate to not give resources to schools because they don't have the space if they are needed. You know what I mean? So if you have a school like, let's say a Plymel that's pretty small, but they have a high number of behavioral issues too. I'm just wondering and I know the principals were the ones that made this up, so I don't know how to make this like.
So, and that was my whole position, is the principals really know what they're gonna need more than I will. Because this is gonna serve all of our kids, not just special education students. So I'm not really in tune with with all of that. But I would say that you take a small school like Georgia Matthews, you know, they have the behavior classroom there, so their needs are going to be a little higher. I think from my perspective, in the world of special education, the areas where I see the most behaviors and the bigger needs are going to be where I have our specialized programs. Our Rise Room at VO, our Rise Room at Charles Stones, our self-contained classrooms at Alta Brown and Anita Sharman. The TEP definitely is probably, I think, the biggest where we see that need.
So you feel like we've already kind of responded, those schools have?
Yeah, I think so. You know, Mr. Horney and I visited, he sent his list. When he sent it to me, I told him, I said, Matt, when you think of this, I want you to think of things that you're not going to be able to get with your building fund. This is going to be a one-time thing. We're never going to be able to do this, because he sent me an order and it was like $350 worth of materials. And I'm like, Matt, that's not appropriate. You need to think bigger picture. And so he said, well, I don't have the space. And so we kind of talked about, you know, what he can do to utilize some of that. And so then that's when he went back. And so if there were orders that come in and I didn't feel like they were hitting that, then I encouraged them to look and think bigger. There was 3 or 4 principals that I had to call and visit with and tell them, this little piddly stuff that you want, you can use your building funds for. You need to think bigger picture for these kiddos and things. Because I can tell you, in 16 years of administration, this is the only time that I can think of where we've had the opportunity to be able to do something like this for our kids. So, and I'll probably be long gone before we have that opportunity again. I hope we don't have another pandemic in my career, at least. So.
I hear what you're saying. I've read, and I think we all know that, like, and we've been told that the behavior issues are increasing, a lot of the sensory thing. I guess what concerned me too, or the kind of thing in the back of my mind, is I have worked for an agency where it's like, hey, we have these funds and we need to spend it. And so people just, okay, I'm just gonna.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah. And like I said, this is something that I've wanted to do forever, and just, at least in the buildings that I've worked in, I've wanted to do that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot on the TEP and I in the alternative school, and I understand why there would be. However, have we gone through and made sure there isn't things that can achieve the same thing, that they're kind of duplicated for the same outcome?
You mean like we bought like duplicated materials for that?
The portable system for.
So what we did.
And then there's also.
What we did with the TEP actually is we kind of had them help us design an entire sensory room for the TEP. And so they're going to have a space that's allocated just for that. And so we kind of went, because that's something that I feel like we really do need at the TEP, and we are spending more money at the TEP. I recognize that, but that's why we did that. And so I don't think there's anything that's going to be duplicated, but I will say that when you have a sensory room, you have the ability to have more than one kiddo access that too. So there may be 4 or 5 kids that are in there at the same time.
So there's a portable system now on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that one's able to like travel from classroom to classroom, whereas the other sensory materials would strictly be just in the sensory room.
Right. The portable system, I think we're really wanting to try to use in the day school quite a bit, because I mean, that's probably our highest needs kids in the district. And so I think our hope is that we can move it down there and use it throughout the day. That's something that Mrs. Jewell, who's the teacher there, really felt like would be beneficial.
So last year when we learned about the ESSER funds, we set 2 goals for all students to be at or above grade level academically, and on target, all students to be on target or better with emotional development. And then we put that information out to building leaders, district leaders, teachers, and said, like Mr. Guyman mentioned, not very often do we get an opportunity to dream big. And money doesn't become a pretty limiting factor pretty fast. But we said, as long as you can justify that your idea will move us towards one of those 2 goals, and you're going to monitor and measure that, then you can present your proposals to our district site council and we'll rank them. and I don't have that, I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, I don't have that list in front of me. But when this went through the district site council in July, where was it, Colleen? It was the second ranked proposal. So for what that's worth, and I think yes, it's a big chunk of money for sure, spread out over 18 different buildings. And there is gonna be some variation based on the different components of it, but the whole intention of this was really to be able to address the social emotional development of kids so that it doesn't interfere with their ability to learn and interfere with learning with other kids. And so that was kind of the process that it went through to get to you today. So
I do know that our behavior consultants are getting contacted a lot to do observations on students with behaviors, to help write behavior plans, a lot more. I mean, they've always been busy, but this has definitely been a busier school cycle are on top of that and involves quite a bit too.
Well, I definitely, and I like the circular, like what the demands of this, because I would, as a board member, like to see, how did some of these work, because inevitably you're gonna get things that they don't work for our students. And I think that's okay. Sometimes we have to try things, but I think some of these things, like it would be really, really beneficial in so many ways to collect that data, to make sure we're looking at, like, did this make a difference for our students and how? I'm very interested in that, just with the increase in behaviors. And if we don't see a change in that, then what do we need to do different or look at those things? So.
Well, and honestly, if we can address some of the behaviors, I think I like a lot easier because I want to see ways and special education referrals and things like that too, so.
And I might just add, this is really expanding the toolbox that people have. Every one of the kids that needs this intervention, the single item may not work, but the one next to it might. It's gonna take some time to have teachers identify what those triggers are, what the right resource is. They have weighted vests in the past they've used, or blankets that works for some kids, doesn't work for other kids. So these are just expanding the toolboxes that these buildings have, because every kid in every situation, and sometimes the same kid in different situations, needs something else. So just because it's the cocoon doesn't mean that single item is gonna do it. It's gonna take some resources and just expanding that toolbox.
Absolutely. Maybe I missed it earlier, but has this been piloted with some of the stuff, these bigger items, have it been piloted or no? This is just a one.
I mean, yeah, basically because we've not been able to afford to buy it to pilot it. I mean, I think a lot of it is from experience with some of the other things that we've had, some of the things on there we do have, the bubble tubes.
Garfield does have one interactive wall that I was able to get through some grants, and it's been very helpful for our students. So we did go ahead and get another one because we're looking at creating a second sensory room to better fit all of our needs.
We have swings, when you look at the swings, the cocoon swing, like Mr. Hogan talked about, we've got those in different buildings. We've got platform swings, we've got.
Some of the different seating options, like the
Yeah.
wobble chair, some buildings already have those.
We do some sensory things, but we've not had it, I guess, to this level with a lot of these things.
So I just think I think our biggest risk is there's some really big ticket items here. And there's multiple of them. And if it doesn't work, that's a big chunk of money.
Sure.
So. And it seems like we pilot most things.
Well, and like on the chill cave, like I said, a lot of the things on that one are, oh, it's not up. There we go. A lot of the things that are on here, we do have similar items. We have, like I said, the swing we've got. I don't think we've got one like that I've seen. Oh no, that's a cocoon swing, isn't it? Yeah, we've got those. We've got the fiber optic lights, the bubble tubes. So a lot of those, and I know that's one that a lot of schools have picked, and I think that's why they've done it, because it gets a lot of the things that they are familiar with.
We've not piloted them in our district necessarily, but and I asked this and I kind of felt like I got a good answer, but they do have reviews and this company is run by occupational therapists. So
Correct.
they do get feedback on
Yeah.
and reviews and what works and maybe perhaps what doesn't, although again, what he said, yes, I know it's not gonna work for
And
everyone.
even when we met with them to do the TEP room, they gave us a lot of good suggestions. They wanted to know what kind of students we had, what kind of behaviors that we were dealing with, so that we, could pick items that would be beneficial to all students.
I'm disappointed there's no request for therapy dog on there.
It was the cheapest one.
We do have one in Garfield.
We've got one at Garfield.
Good, good. I need to come
And we've
visit.
got, I know Gina Galpin's working with one at Sits. And Amy's got one, Amy's got two at Stones. That's right, Buffy's got her two little
I
ones,
just
so.
had to get that plug in there so I could hear where they're all at.
They're- I would love for my dog to come to work with me, but I'm afraid that she would just make a mess, so,
Cause more behavior
Yeah.
issue than.
yeah. I'd have to write a behavior plan for her too.
Good.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
So I think one of the things that hasn't been said here, we've talked about the company being with occupational therapists. But much of this, just like the therapy dog, it is research based. So we know that the kids need something that is maybe moving fast or maybe something that will wrap them tight and give them that sense of a hug kind of thing. But not any one thing will work for each kid. So when they devise these rooms, they have to have a plethora, if you will, of different items because the first child that comes in may want that hug feeling. And the next one, his mind may be racing and he wants to look at something like the lights that are going up and down. And after he does that for a while, it will help de-escalate him. So they have to have a variety just because the different needs of the students. But each one of these has been through a research process. And they know that's why it's, with occupational therapists, it's like the therapy dogs. So there's a reason for that. And I would love to have Teddy in every single one of our buildings. So
it sounds like we have some others that I need to go visit in the
we're
district.
branching out. Yes, we are branching out.
It was completely off subject, but it led
But
it into
yes,
some good
there's
discussion. so.
research to back the sensory development of our children and what they need. And I could go into some, there's a different need for children with autism. There's a different need for children with ADHD. Sometimes just that anxiety, there may not be a special ed diagnosis, but they're afraid of, maybe something happened at home that day or some kind of trauma. And they need some time to just sit and get away from it all. So there's lots of research behind many of these items.
And a lot of them are teaching kids how to self-regulate.
Right, and that's our whole goal is to teach our kids how to self-regulate, because if they can do that on their own without those resources, then they're gonna be in the classroom longer, then our academic scores should go up too, so.
Are we looking to approve?
Yes.
The bids? Do you want me to go ahead and make that?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions or?
That we accept the bid of Fun and Function LLC. $217,002. Let's put it that way.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any other discussion before we vote? I don't want to rush you. So I don't have any. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, motion passed. Thank you for coming back and. Okay, we will move on to the math curriculum adoption. We have some questions or discussion on that.
You have another
And you're here to
handout
talk
for you.
about it.
Yep, and Linda came back too.
Okay.
Michelle Byer wasn't able to do this, she has a family emergency.
I'm
So-
gonna jump in real quick and, do you wanna talk first or do you want questions?
Just questions. I'm
Okay.
not sure I really have anything else to add or present. I think we're just here to answer any questions you may have about how we came about to the decision, the process, or any other questions you may have about the curriculum available.
And I do, I understand this went through a committee process and all that, and so I appreciate that and all the knowledge that's there. My question for this, just because I have a little history with the math side of things when the math curriculum really changed and we went to Engage New York, is, and then my understanding that Eureka Math, is it an offset of that? Or is it a
So
completely
it's a
different
company that bought out or took the process of Engage New York,
Mhm.
made it their own curriculum, adopted it, and now this is the second version of Eureka. So it'd be the third version of Engage New York.
And my concern when this curriculum first came about is that there was so much focus on the deeper thinking, the critical thinking, that there was some missteps, I don't know if that's the right word, where learning the basics was ignored or not applied. And that's coming from a personal standpoint because I have a high schooler now that she's doing well in math, but we found that we had to supplement a lot later on because those math facts, some of the basic things that traditionally we taught our kids weren't there. And it's a new way of trying to teach kids how and why. I feel like I'm telling you what you already know, but maybe to explain to the rest of the room. So kids know why 2 + 2 is 4 versus just memorizing it and taking away some of that memorization. I, as a parent, saw that as holding them back more because she really struggled with that. But I'm not saying every student that was that way. That's just some concerns that I had and that I had heard from some other parents. So I was just wondering, with this curriculum, are teachers able to supplement some things like that now? Because when that curriculum was first implemented, it was no supplements. And so that would make me more comfortable with continuing with the same, or if they've changed their curriculum a bit to bring that back in. Oh my goodness, that was a lot of questions.
That is a lot of
too,
questions.
but,
Well, first of all, I teach self-contained at English Sharman, first, second grade. So I volunteered to be on this committee because I wanted to speak for my building, for the teachers that were in my building. They have the same kind of concerns that you had. They had the same kind of concerns. So when I would ask and they would tell me, yes, they were concerned about the fact that Eureka, and then we went to Engage to Eureka, and then Eureka Squared. A lot of teachers, when I was telling them what all we were doing, did not want Eureka. But as we got on the committee and we started talking with other committee members and other staff in other buildings, we felt that this new Eureka program, Eureka Squared, had a lot more to offer than the previous Eureka also had. So there's a lot of more intervention pieces to Eureka Squared from what I can see. And that was a big plus for me because we have always struggled with self-contained as far as having the same curriculum as the Reg Ed classrooms and building off of that. And it's really hard. So the intervention piece has been wonderful. From what I can tell, if students are still struggling, they have the like post-tests or pre-tests, I guess you'd say. And from what I can tell, that will help teachers see where they need to add extra interventions and extra work for those students. I agree with you as far as math facts go. I worked in another district a few years back that was a big thing, math facts. Kids didn't know them. They still don't know them. So it's really hard. I mean, we have the critical thinking and that's wonderful. But I would agree on that side of we need to be able to have that opportunity to add to it if we need to. And I believe that Eureka Square does offer that.
yeah, that's just a concern that we were expecting to do kids to do things that they weren't developmentally ready for. When they're little, their brains are sponges, they can memorize that stuff and maybe they don't exactly understand why it is, but they're gonna remember that later and be able to link that. And there was a little bit of, and hopefully this has improved, where the lessons were not, or when it came to the assessment, they weren't aligning. And we even had one, my husband teases me about it, but a problem that one of the kids had, and we had my engineering professional who couldn't figure it out just because it was one of those in there that just wasn't worded correctly that made sense. It almost like they were trying to trick them so much that the basic process wasn't there. So that's what I was curious if that's something you looked at and you saw improvements in that versus the original.
So for sure on the assessment piece. So there's a whole assessment suite. So what I handed there just for you guys to look at is the rubric that the committee decided. So the rubric that they used to rank which company, which publisher the highest was a very rigorous rubric. It was developed with the high school staff over the summer with Melissa Fast and then adopted through for K-6 as well. So just really historically speaking very quickly, there was a major shift in math standards in 2012. My son just graduated this last weekend. I'm still kind of worn out from graduation, but when he was going from 4th to 5th grade is when the shift was made. And our standards jumped forward about 18 months. I was a consultant at that time, was working with a lot of districts on math and making that change. Where that shift jumped and whether they were 4th to 5th grade, 3rd to 4th, 2nd to 3rd, there was a big jump that they made that they did lose out on a lot of skills. And a lot of these mathematical programs at that time were trying to play catch up. And we just didn't do a real good job as a state and as a nation in making that adjustment. Eureka 1 really did a better job of fitting that than Engage New York did. Within Eureka Squared, we're going to see the focus on the coherence of the process working. So in kindergarten, they're going to learn how to count. In 1st grade, they're going to learn which numbers are in the ones place, which one's in the tens place, which one's in the hundreds place. And it's going to allow them to create automaticity, which will allow them to mathematically add, subtract, divide, and multiply quicker as those math facts are built. So it's almost like we're built, instead of just doing the structure of building the multiplication and division and the math facts, just the bones of it, we're building the building at the same time. So it's going to take a little bit more time to get the math facts, but we're going to have a deeper understanding of them as they go. On the assessment piece, part of what Eureka Squared is they're moving from an open educational resource or a free company to a company that we're going to purchase something from them is called their digital bundle. And it has a pre-assessment tool and a post-assessment. In the past with Engage New York and Eureka, we were writing our own assessments based on the problems that the kids were seeing during the day. Now we will have assessments that are pre-made and pre-created by Eureka that are aligned directly to the modules and to the lessons with them. All of our students and all of the staff in Eureka will be able to give a pre-assessment before Module 1, Module 3, and Module 5 that gives them a pre-assessment skills of what standards are they missing before we start that module. So I would be able to give an assessment to a group of students and know which students are missing which skills before I even started teaching. That's a powerful tool that the teachers thought was the most important to them, is because now they're walking in knowing which skills the students are missing versus having to wait till after a test or after a homework assignment to decide what skills they were missing. So they're going to be able to front load and provide just-in-time supports at a much higher level by using that assessment piece. And that was really one of the big deciding factors, as well what Linda was mentioning, the intervention piece. So now as the kids are doing the homework and we know those are the standards they're missing, I have a digital tool that I can go to and say, hey, you need just a little extra practice on this. It may be math facts, it may be problem solving, it may be measuring. And we can specifically design and tailor some of those interventions to the kids versus all kids just doing something extra.
Thank you. That answers my question.
It sounds like we're supplementing a lot, maybe Dreambox, things like that. Do we see that some of that goes away or with this, or is it?
I'll let you, I'll answer, but I don't want to take your thunder either.
Dreambox, it provides a lot of higher order thinking for our students, especially in self-contained. Some of the problems that the students are doing now, it's really difficult for me to figure out. I'm just like, okay, we'll have to study this because, so I think the Dreambox it's supplementing that. From what I hope I'm answering your question. From what I see of the new curriculum, I think that will coincide with Dreambox.
We may not need to rely on it as much. When we're using Eureka 1, a free resource, you get, sometimes you get what you pay for. It's free. It's good stuff, but there's not those extras. So that's why we're going with Dreambox and some of those other features to help supplement for enrichment or interventions. We may need Dreambox for some enrichment activities for our students that are above and beyond grade level, but in terms of students that are struggling or needing intervention support, we believe what Eureka Squared has will meet those needs, and we may not have to rely on Dreambox supplementing as much.
So can we track that? Kind of look at how often we use Dreambox and supplement? Because is it a possibility that it could be phased out if this material turns out, or?
Yeah, we do have Brittany works with our rep Candace on weekly reports, monthly reports on which buildings are using it, how much they're using it. So we do have a usage report that we know. There's some buildings that are requiring it every day, some buildings are using it just for interventions, and so we'd be able to measure which buildings are using it. Our hope as we are moving into this is that we will decrease the dependency on Dreambox because Eureka Squared's interventions will directly align with what we're teaching in the classroom versus having to find what it is in Dreambox and make that connection. So that should save some time for staff as well when that's already predetermined by that pre-assessment.
Just because we are having a changing of the guard, has Dr. Dominguez looked at these curriculums and given any input from his side of things?
I believe we had a short conversation just this last week when he was here. It was, Glenda and I and Dr. Dominguez were just having a conversation about where we were at in the process. We shared with him, the adoption committee that we went through and what we had selected, and that was an add-on of what we've been doing. And he seemed very happy with the process and understanding of where we were at. I'm not sure there was an opinion given, one way or the other, but he was made aware of what we were proceeding with.
We know that I think all of us got one of the emails that was sent, and I don't know if it was a committee member or what, but just in favor of the curriculum. And I just wanted to share with you because I have an outside relationship with another person that was on the thing, and they were very much in favor, but because I have a relationship, she just sent me a quick text today because she couldn't be here. So I just wanted to share that with you guys too, that she was very, very much in favor of the Eureka Squared.
And I would say, from a standpoint of a staff member, with the staffing shortage that we are looking at around the state of Kansas, I think that if you have this in place, it's not something totally new that we have to learn, and all of us have to learn. You have seasoned staff that can help the new teachers coming in, and it won't be so stressful, especially with professional development or, just those assessments. From my point of view, that's what I feel. And that's why we went with Eureka Squared also, because the fact it's something that's familiar to all staff members. And so we could help, guide the new staff members if they have any questions, and it's not totally brand new.
And I think we asked this last time, but I'm not sure because we've had a lot of different curriculums come through, but there is the professional development provided through the program as well, right?
We have tentative upon if and when this is ever approved, we do have a professional development contract with Great Minds, the parent company. For 3 days, there'll be 1 day with administrators and coaches on leading Eureka Squared. There'll be 1 day for all math teachers. That will be called Power Up, and it's how to use the digital tools and to carry on from Eureka 1 to Eureka Squared. And both of those will happen in August, and then we're looking at a day in January where it'll be called Launch. And it's just getting a little bit more specifically on how to enhance your lessons using all the features available. So we have 3 days planned for the next year. Year 2, we have 2 days planned, which are 2 different types of assessments, plus we'll add a 3rd day. That is the Power Up again for all new staff. And then year 3, we have 1 more day for all staff, and then we'll redo that Power Up, which is kind of the kickoff. So we have a 3-year plan of implementation of professional development in place.
And there was some online options.
That was for the other 2, the high school, middle school and high school. Those had online webinars that are on demand at any time that they can take. Those are free. Sometimes they do have crowdsourced professional development where a teacher in Michigan may say, hey, I'm putting on this PD on how to use this aspect of illustrative math. It'll be at 7 o'clock at this time at this night, and everybody can get on and watch. So it's more of a crowdsourced.
I might just make a quick comment. I know especially for our new board members, big decisions and we're kind of putting you in a spot where you got to trust the process here. Really a good idea if you get a chance to serve on a curriculum committee or on the curriculum council, because I think what you'll see is the amount of work that the teachers and Jason and their folks put in on one of these adoptions to really try to look at all different angles on these and really make the decisions about what's best. And I mean, some of them are going to be better at a certain piece, and Linda's comment about the transition for teachers is a piece that factors into all this too. So it is kind of a really big process to go through. And so especially for these major curriculums like math and ELA, I mean, those are affect every grade level. And so thanks to the people that do that. I mean, it's taken on a huge task, but I think you'll see that there is a basis for how they come with these recommendations, how they arrive at those, and that, these are, how long have you been working on this for?
I estimate it's probably 2 to 3 hours, outside of contract time per month that we were meeting. And so, over 8 months, we started in September. So,
Since September.
You probably put in 20 to 24 hours of outside contract time work amongst all staff to come to this conclusion.
And that doesn't count the staff members' time in the instruction office that are doing the behind the scenes work for the committee. That's just committee time, so.
And you've seen the areas, you've made a presentation to the board a few months ago, kind of where we were struggling in our testing and different things. And with these different curriculums, do you see that they're strong in those things that we struggle with?
Yes, I mean, it still comes down to the right resource with the right pedagogy, the teaching strategy, with students being engaged and having high expectations. Our 4 key resources to acceleration learning is what will be successful, what make us successful on the assessments. The curriculum is a key piece of it, and it gives us all the tools necessary to reach that on grade level that you guys have as a goal. We have other parts that we need to continue to work on as well too, engaging students, sound teaching strategies. But the curriculum right now at this point in time, through all of our audits, through all of our work, provides us with the best opportunities. The IM and CPM are the highest rated that you can get on the Ed Reports, which is a nationally recognized agency for curriculum work. We should this summer get one on Eureka Squared, because this is the first year that it's been in publication for anybody to use. But their latest blog says there's an anticipation that it'll be one of the highest rated available, higher than what Eureka 1 was, which was 2 points off being a perfect score. So I believe, in my estimation, that we will now have solid resources from K-12 to provide us with the opportunity to be on grade level. And then we're going to work on the strategies to go with it as well, and the deep engagement to get us where we need to be. I would also say, if there's still some lingering questions or hesitations, this is something, this is a big purchase. It's going to affect, 7,000 students. That it may be something, if you wish to push it for a couple of weeks to make a decision. So if you have any more questions that come up, we can get those answered for you during that time, versus if there's a lingering question and trying to vote on still having some questions. It may, be something that our office can put together more answers for you, because we're getting things as quickly as we could over, the last couple of work days to get that information for you. So I don't want to, if there's any more questions, let us, make sure we do our due diligence and get those to you, so you have all the tools necessary to make the best decision possible.
And if we held off on that, what would that do to the timeline of?
So every day that it's pushed is one day later getting the materials. If we are able to start working on the contract tomorrow, there's ideas that we could have everything here in place by June 1. So then every day after that is a day later, but I would rather be a day late than $1 short, so to speak.
I know we've gotten several emails in support of this. I'm thinking that's the majority of what the teachers.
The Eureka Squared was a unanimous vote by everyone that was on there. In the junior high, we did have some split decision between illustrative math and Eureka. of which one they wanted to go to. It was deadlocked. It was 100% deadlocked. And so I pulled in Michelle Byer, who's the high school teacher, and she spoke last week and just said, which would be best for that transition to Algebra 1? Because there's a little bit of that change. Fifth grade, kind of fifth and sixth grade stops, the basics of math, and we start moving towards algebraic thinking. So having a similar system starting in seventh grade, leading to Algebra 1, leading to Algebra 2, we felt like was the best fit for us. And so that's why the decision was leaned towards illustrative math.
Yes, I really think this is a huge decision, and I think everybody's done, committees, I really appreciate all that. I would like to hear from Mark and John, and the fact that they're not here tonight doesn't necessarily feel right to pass something to the scale for the entire district without at least hearing they're on board, and also that Dr. Dominguez is too, I guess. So, but I'm one of 4, so.
I'm comfortable with that. If you feel it won't mess up the timeline, like in terms of what we need to get done, or my concern with putting it off is there anything that, like, do teachers want to have some type of prep, and by putting it right, by putting it off, are we then making their job more difficult into the summer, or starting them off not having this curriculum?
Some yes, some no. I mean, some teachers, when it gets to May 20th, brains are gonna shut off for a little while from school, recharge, get their batteries recharged and be ready to go. They may be ready to go in July. Some want it in May and June and want to look at it for a little bit and then put it away. Our idea and thought was the quicker that we could have it, the quicker it could be in their hands so that they have the opportunity to prepare when they're ready this summer. So that was our option, but I don't want us to, if there's some hesitation, I don't want us to rush something that if it's a 2 weeks, then it's 2 weeks. But I firmly believe we had a large consensus of the staff that wanted this. We're really thinking about how we can engage staff to be able to help retain them. And that's something we've learned through the retention summits that we attended in the last couple of weeks. Is teacher engagement is one of the highest reasons to keep people in the business and or they leave. And teachers having a voice in their opportunities of what they teach is a large part of that engagement. And they were the ones that drove the process. I thought it was very powerful that the teachers were the ones. I kind of sit back and just, okay, here, let's talk about this now. And then they went. They were a very passionate, organized group that put a lot of time and energy into filling out the rubrics, to researching all the pieces, because they did come in with a little bit of a, we're tired of Eureka. That was kind of the thought. And then when they dug into it and they looked at the new tools and they looked at the revamping, they lessened, it went from 160 some lessons to only 130 lessons. So we have more days for assessment, more days for reteaching when needed. Those were the tools they thought was the most powerful. And then they fell in love with Eureka again. And so I really believe that the teachers have committed and put in the work to say this is what they feel will engage them in the teaching process.
I guess my question is too, because I understand where you're coming from, Kimmy, but the board has had the book and the information for quite a while that we would be voting on this tonight. So if anybody had heard from other board members about a high concern for this curriculum, I'm fine tabling it. But if there hasn't been any conversation or something put out there I haven't received anything myself, maybe Jennifer as president, then I feel confident that it's done its due diligence through committees and being presented twice to the board to move forward with the vote. But if we don't have the board vote, then obviously I want to table it for 2 weeks. So if you don't feel like you can vote on it confidently, I'm just giving you that, because as a board, there's definitely going to be times when we're not here, and when we can't be here, we feel strongly about, I think we should put that, don't make a precedent where we table things because we don't have a full board, because it just prolongs the process. And I think it makes people uncomfortable, and it gives them a sense of like, okay, we've got this, now we can move on and we can move with it. We're leaving it open-ended for very long periods of time. That gives me anxiety. I don't know how it makes other people feel, but I don't want to do that if it's not necessary.
Was the last meeting when this was presented on the first time?
It was the first time, and a lot of questions were asked, and I mean, I felt like we had a really good discussion. That's why I didn't feel like there were big red flags, but if you did, then I mean, we can certainly table it. I just hate to make that. I just hate to continue to put things on until we have full board. Where if you do have a red flag and you can't be here, you know, like make it well known, so we don't vote or we remove it from the agenda. Do you want to table it? I think I'd like to hear from the other two.
I'm comfortable with it, but if it's a decision we make to wait, that's fine. I guess this is one where I feel like it's an opportunity. I can see where Cammie's coming from, and it would instill more confidence in her and myself, which I was gone last time, so this is on me too for not being able to hear Mark and John's thoughts and maybe any other questions they may have on that. And I hate to put that on teachers, and not that I don't trust the process, but if that can put more confidence in the board and the district, if we take those 2 weeks to really process it.
What is the drawback of 2 weeks, I guess?
Say that again.
What's the drawback of 2 weeks delay? Like, is it
Getting it
by
to-
June 1, so we get it by June 15th?
Right.
Right, so then school doesn't start till August. I mean, is there gonna be a lot of missing in those 2 weeks?
If it's here by June 1, because that was kind of what the company had talked to us about, we would still have, 75 teachers on summer school. And so they'd be able to get their hands on that things pretty quickly. A lot of them are still paying attention to their emails, and so we could get emails to them with their digital access to their online portals. They would still be maybe, working on cleaning up their rooms for the year, still be a little bit around. By June 15th, that's a time where I know, former administrator and teacher myself, by June 15th, my brain is needing to recharge. And so I want to turn my email off and turn away from some of those things for a little while. So that would be the only drawback is some of them would not see some of that until mid-July or late July when they're coming back, versus they would still maybe have the opportunity to look at it here early in June. Another drawback would just be we've got a great relationship with our company reps right now. Our teachers are really fired up about this. We have a lot of momentum built within the staff because of how they own the process. And so they're really excited about the direction we're heading with this new curriculum and just wanting to get their hands on it. It's be something similar, maybe not as close to a Christmas present, but it's kind of like, I don't want to wait till Christmas Day. If I can get it a little bit earlier, I want it as early as I can.
I'm comfortable with the curriculum, but I really, when there's, I want to support my board members too, when there's things that you're not sure about, that if more information would help that once we make that decision, that we're confident in that decision, that's where I'm supporting. So, but I don't want to push you into.
Give an official statement instead of just a.
We can continue to work. Again, they're an open educational resource, so they don't have really an official, large company scale. So that was what we could get in the shorter time frame that we had, because that was directly from the CEO, and he said you guys could contact him directly if you had any more questions. It's not something that a lot of companies, math companies, do, is having to have CRT statements, because it's just not something that has really come up with these companies. When I contacted one of them, this is the first time they've had to ever do that. And so this isn't something that's real natural for them to have CRT statements. And so they just don't have a lot of that crafted, ready to just give like some other companies might. So we could continue to work on seeing if we can get something on a letterhead or an official letter. But that was directly in an email from the CEO.
I feel comfortable with it because was supported by the group so much. I don't want
And you guys have done a great job.
I don't want to undermine any of their work, and I feel that they probably have done a lot of research and input.
And there's a lot of good companies out there. This wasn't one of those, sometimes you say we got the best of the worst. This is the best of the best. We aren't asking for, we're asking for a Cadillac. We're asking for, the best version to be able to give our teachers those options to drive that learning with the best tools. So we are asking for, the best. if you do table it, I would ask if I could take some questions tonight so I can start working on those. You know, our days are full here at the end of the year, so if I could have those to start working on, then that makes it a little bit easier to get you guys the information as quick as possible as well.
Have you had any other questions from board members regarding the math curriculum? And we put it out on Facebook as well, right? Did we get any feedback?
It's been on the website, it's.
And
been able to
in-person
be-
visits.
Yeah, yeah, there's been plenty of opportunities to review for patrons.
And I can come in, but well, and if there was a motion made tonight, I would most likely vote for it. So I just wanted the opportunity. If anyone else just wasn't comfortable.
I'm gonna go ahead and make the motion to approve the math curriculum adoption as presented.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your information.
Good.
Foreign language curriculum adoption.
Jason, do you want to handle those questions for foreign language? Or do we have, oh, Brittany's here. Okay. She was on the other side.
We just want to see you all again. Hello. I don't really have questions on this one, so I'm gonna let you guys.
I did not have questions on this.
I might think this is to make sure that we got these.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, this company did provide a CRT statement. It's on their letterhead.
But if you have anything else you would like to tell us to.
No, it's great. We're excited about it. And the company, when I contacted them about their statement, they'd already been working on it, but we kind of spurred them on to finish it by this evening. So they were great working with us. So
Thank you for reaching out to them. And getting that so we can move forward.
So you're good. Jackie, are you, okay, I move that we approve the foreign language curriculum adoption as presented.
Second.
I'll second.
All opposed, or all opposed? I'm gonna need help with these. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passed. Thank you very much. Funding and state school funding.
hello. So tonight I'm going to give you just kind of a quick update on where our budget currently stands. So last year, the federal government changed the requirements from the household or from the free and reduced lunch application to the household economic survey. So since the lunches for all students were provided for free, parents didn't feel incentivized necessarily to fill out the household economic survey and provide their private income with this for the school district. So this ultimately resulted in a drastic drop in the number of surveys that were collected. This table is an update of our current financial status for the school district. Last year when building the budget, it was based off of the adopted column figures. The audited column is based off of finalized headcount and weightings the KSDE auditor has provided recently. As you can see, we have an almost $1.8 million deficit from the result of the decrease in surveys that was unexpected. This impacted primarily our at-risk and high-density at-risk weights. Our base for fiscal year 22, or this current school year, is 4706. This increases to 4846 next year. That's an increase of $140 per student. For next year, we have calculated a conservative estimate for our total expected weightings. We currently expect that we will receive a total increase in our revenues to the total of 2.1 million. But we still have almost a $1.8 million hole to fill from this year. So that leaves a total increase of $343,793. In order to maintain our salary schedule, that expense totals $675,000. We have also calculated that the increase in board contribution for our health insurance would be $750,000. As you all know, healthcare pricing just continues to increase. It hasn't been necessary to increase the cost for employees for several years, but now it will be necessary for the next several years in order to keep offering a robust benefit for our employees. We will need to increase the premiums and board contribution and adjust benefits by reducing or finding efficiencies or a combination of both. In the previous slide, you saw that we only had $343,793 remaining to address compensation. So we had to identify one-time budget cuts that we could do for next year if necessary for the district to offer this compensation package. So this is a slide that shows the budget adjustments for fiscal year 23. So we could, again, these are 1 year budget cuts that we could do. So transfer cost of the iPads to capital outlay, those are currently paid out of our supplemental general fund. We could reduce or transfer to virtual or pause route bus rotation purchases. Again, that would be 1 year. We couldn't continue to pause our bus rotation purchases. And then next, Dr. Carlin will start talking about
that last slide real quick.
I think
Is he gonna cover that?
we'll cover it and then we can come back and do questions.
That'll work.
So Dr. Carlin will give a little bit of a history of Kansas school funding.
So Colleen shared a little bit about kind of where we were this year, what we anticipate for next year based on some extra money coming to the base per pupil aid. So it's important to acknowledge that that base aid is coming because of the Gannon lawsuit and the legislature's 5-year plan to do that catch-up funding for schools, and we're still waiting on the governor to finalize the bill that is on her desk. The education budget is still in that. So we anticipate that it'll either happen then, or if for some reason she bounces it back to them when they go back to Topeka at the end of May, that the state will fulfill their obligation. I think it's $140 a student more, if I remember right. So again, with some new board members and some of us that our memories are failing a little bit, we thought it was important to kind of, I'm gonna let you pass that down. We thought it was important to kind of do a little review of what's happened with Kansas school funding over time. And so this next chart, and I know it's probably hard to read on the screen, so I gave you a written copy. This shows what's happened to base state aid per pupil since 1992. So you can see that base state aid per pupil in 1992 was $3,600. And you can see for a few years, it remained relatively flat. And then it went up a little bit and then flattened out again. So that time from about fiscal year 99 to about fiscal year 2005 was a time period where the state was in court about school funding. So where you see that yellow arrow coming up from the bottom, that was basically in response to that Montoy lawsuit. The legislature again dramatically increased that base state aid. And inflation is not indicated on this graph, but these numbers are numbers that are not inflation adjusted numbers. So you got to remember costs are going up at the same time. So as with our buying power our numbers staying relatively flat, schools had basically a loss in buying power during that time. So the Montoy lawsuit happened, and about fiscal year 2009, 2010, you see a big drop off. So we all probably remember that in 2008, we had a significant recession that the country and the state dealt with, and school funding was actually cut at that point. That also coincides with the time that the state Supreme Court gave up jurisdiction of the Montoy lawsuit. So it didn't take very long and school funding got cut. And you can see that we kind of went back through a period where funding was pretty level. About 2012, I believe 2011 or 12, there was another school funding lawsuit, the Gannon case. And that case took until about 2017 to get resolved. And part of that resolution then was a 5-year catch-up to increase base state aid funding for schools to get us to the 2009 inflation adjusted levels. So next year is the last year of that 5-year catch-up cycle. And then the current law says that school funding will be increased based on a 3-year rolling average of the CPI. So as inflation goes up, school funding should go up. That would kind of make sense because, you know, when inflation goes up, our utility costs go up, our food costs go up, our textbook costs go up, and our employees, we want to be able to give them a raise that hopefully is you know, within the within reason related to the increase in the cost of living. So the point of sharing this with you is, and I'll pass this one out. Don't leave that one yet, Colleen. So the point in sharing this, I guess go ahead to the next one. We'll come back to this here. You can see that those colored charts kind of indicate the different lawsuits that happened in the state regarding to school funding. None of us want to have to be in court with people suing the state. But you can see the amount of time since the case got filed until it got resolved has taken longer and longer. So with that green one, that's Gannon. And basically during all that time, schools across the state have not had inflation adjusted levels of funding. So that means every student that's in our schools their education has been underfunded. And if you happen to be a kid that graduated towards the beginning of that green bar, most of the time that you went to school, our schools were not funded at a constitutional level. We're getting really close to where we're going to be at that point. And as long as the state fulfills that obligation and then adjusts for inflation, hopefully we never have to deal with another school finance lawsuit kind of situation. But it's important that we recognize there's a lot of water under the bridge with this. And if you'll go back to the last slide, please. So there's 3 yellow arrows there on the end. So that point is kind of where we're at right now. The top arrow is basically what happens if next year the state funds the formula they have and they fund us for inflation. Now, obviously that's a projection because none of us know what the 3-year rolling average for inflation will be, but we're pretty confident it'll go up, right? The middle arrow would show what would happen if the legislature just said, hey, we're no longer going to increase schools. We're just going to flatten out school funding. And you might think, well, why would that happen? Well, if you look back to those other examples, you see periods in that chart where education funding has been flat for a considerable amount of time, right? So it's probably not out of the realm of possibility that that could happen again. But what that would mean to us is that would mean no more money coming in to be able to cover our increasing costs. And then you see the bottom arrow, which, wow, that would be kind of catastrophic. If that base state aid goes down, then we would actually be losing funding that we're now counting on. And you think, well, there's absolutely no way that would happen, right? Well, look back on the chart and look back to fiscal year 2010. And you see a pretty big drop off. So my point in sharing all this with you is, as a board, one of your functions really needs to be advocating for our school system, for our kids. And sometimes, I know we're a long ways away from Topeka. Sometimes it's easy to think, well, that's not something we have influence on, or somebody else is taking care of that. And I think it's just going to be important for the board to remember going forward, none of this is a given, none of this is a guarantee. And so it's going to be important from a funding standpoint in general that the district continue to advocate for fair funding for public schools and for our school kids, because it will have a significant impact on Garden City kids if we get that bottom arrow here in the future. It'll have a significant impact if we get the flat arrow. And none of us want to be at a spot where we got to go back to court. In part, if you'll go back to that other slide, because if we do slip back and either cut or flatten that funding out, look at that green bar. That could be how long it takes to get it fixed again. And that certainly would not be something that would be good for our kids. One more slide. So this, and I apologize, I know that may be hard to read too. So there's another piece of funding that is important for the board to think about. So the first, that first column shows the year. And that's current fiscal year. We don't have 22 data available. But the second column, that's the percentage of state aid that is paid on our bond payment, on any bond payments that came about that were approved before, or any bond issues that were approved before 2015. So when we passed the bond issue for Garden High in 2008, at that time, I think it was 36 or 37% of our payment was going to be paid by the state. That changes every year based on our assessed valuation per pupil. And there's a formula that the state used, and actually that formula was one of the results of the Montoy lawsuit that happened back from 1999 through 2005. That number has went up over time. And so last year, when we went to make our mortgage payment on the high school, right, our bond payment, 61% of that payment was paid by the state. The law changed in 2015. And that's what that second column is. If we would have waited until 2015 to pass the bond for the new high school, then the formula was changed and only 21% of our payment would have been paid by state aid. One of the major differences in that formula was in 2015, they included Fort Leavenworth. For those who aren't familiar with Fort Leavenworth, it's not Leavenworth. Fort Leavenworth is the actual military base. And the schools on Fort Leavenworth are paid for by the federal government. So Fort Leavenworth will never pass a bond issue. They can't because the feds pay it. There's, I think, two pieces of property that are not government property on the entire fort. There's a Burger King and something else. So their assessed valuation is incredibly low. So when you take an assessed valuation per pupil figure, it's a ridiculously low number. So the way the law is written is they get 75% of base state aid paid, and then you scale, but the next closest district to them because of that is, and I can't name the district, but it comes in at 51%. So Fort Leavenworth would get a 75% reduction, but the next closest one is 51%. And then it goes all the way down to us at 21%. So we were working to try to get that law changed. And we actually thought we had it done. And at the last minute, somebody threw in an amendment that did take Fort Leavenworth out of the equation, but they changed the 75% cap to 51. So it essentially left every other school district at the same percentage. And that's in that bill sitting on the governor's desk, that if she signs the education budget, that becomes law too. So what that means to Garden City is if that's where the law ends up, if you pass a bond issue, you'll get 21% paid, not 61%. Had they not thrown that amendment in there, it wouldn't have brought it all the way back to 61, but it would have brought us to about 48%. So that's why that's approximately 48%. So this is another issue that could have a profound impact on this community's ability to build new schools or to pass bond issues for other needs. And I think, again, that may be something that the board wants to think about going forward. There's a group out there, the Schools for Fair Funding Group, and part of their role is to lobby on issues like this. Dodge is a member. We've been a member, I think, twice in the last 17 years, but not recently. This is also the group that did the lawsuit, did the Gannon lawsuit. And some people think it's, you know, it's not appropriate for one government agency to sue another. But there's lobbying efforts that happen before you go to court. And the hope, I think, would be that this group might see this as an equity issue that's consistent with some of their positions in the past, and may be a group that could help you if that's a priority. If the board goes down the road of wanting to pursue a bond issue, I think our local taxpayers would much rather pay the balance of 48% than the balance of the 21. So we felt it was important for you to have this information, because we're sharing some with you tonight about here's what's happening with our local budget, but all of that is dictated by what the state formula provides. And I think, you know, even more basic than that, I think it's important for our constituents and patrons to understand that the school board is a little different than what, like, say, the city commission does. The city commission can set the mill levy at whatever level they think is appropriate. Now, some of the tax lid stuff may have changed that a little bit, but you don't have that option. The school's budget is capped based on the state's formula, which goes back to our enrollment and our weightings. So you don't have the opportunity to increase to whatever level you think the local people would support. The only tool you have is the local option budget. And it has a finite limit on what you can do. And most people don't realize that schools are funded a little bit differently than what, say, the city or the county, the mechanisms that are used to fund those things. So anyhow, just wanted to make sure you had that information. We're not asking you to make any decisions tonight, but we're just trying to give you an update and bring you up to speed. There's a local piece, but there's also a statewide piece, and I know our veterans on the board know about the advocacy things that have gone on in the past, but especially for our newer folks, that has a huge impact on the decisions that you will get to make and have to make going forward. So that was the purpose of the presentation, information only.
On to the bullying policy review.
I got just a real short PowerPoint just to kind of take an overview of what we've done. You have, that was put in the board packet that you have with you, was the old policy that was written, and then the new policy is below it. The last time the board adopted policy was 2013. This last summer, KSDE and KASB came out with new language and guidance. And so through that, they asked us to put a little bit of a committee together to form a policy. And so the committee members were myself, Brittany Shields, Diane Elliott, who is our district counselor, SEL leader, Tracy Leiker, principal at VO, Jennifer Armstrong, counselor at VO, Kelly Pitts, counselor at KH, April Miller, TOSA at Stones, Christina Yachman, counselor at Achieve, and then Dr. Singh, principal at Garden City High School. So those are the ones that we tasked with reviewing the old policy we had and looked at the language that was recommended by KASB and KSDE for a new policy to just better fit the needs of how bullying has evolved over time and making sure that we have some clear guidance and clear definitions. So in November, we organized the committee. We really wanted to make sure that elementary, middle school, and high school are all represented. So that's why we asked for one building administrator and one counselor from each level. And those people volunteered. In December, we did our first read of the current policy. We looked at the pros and cons of what the policy was. January, we did a first read of the new proposed policy. Again, we balanced the pros and cons. And then in February, we put together a rough draft of the new policy, put that together, sent it to leadership for review, and then they moved it on to the lawyer to look at, and then we're bringing it to you guys tonight to review for that. Why did we update it? Because again, it was last updated in September of 2013. Cyberbullying was not in the original policy at that point in time, even though that's when it was starting to emerge and really become part of an issue. We needed to clearly define bullying more than what it was within the old policy. So if you look at some of the new language in there, it really defines it a little bit more as persistent, unintentional, unwanted, that there's some clear descriptive words of what bullying is. And then the definition of what a parent or a staff member was. In the old policy, it did list that, parents or staff members could not, bully students or bully other staff members, things along those lines, but did not clearly define who was under that category. So the new language does that, as you can read. What we did as a committee, we added two different words. So in the first paragraph of the new policy, the word unwanted was not in there. So we added that word. And then we also added the word persistent when it defined bullying. But those were the only two language changes that we made. It clearly defined the four key areas that bullying was. It also clearly defined cyberbullying and how that impacts school and education. It defines the parent and the staff member. It does have a statement focusing on bullying prevention. So not only will your policy, if this is adopted, identify what bullying is, but also identify that we will have a bullying prevention process. And so using our character counts, using some of our leader and me, some of those different social emotional learning activities that the students will be doing during the day, that will be part of our bullying prevention plan. It does create a witness good faith actor retaliation clause. So that was not in the old policy. So if someone is a witness to bullying and reports that, it protects them from being retaliated against by the bully or by the victim. So it protects those people for that. And then we also did in the discipline paragraph, the very last one, we did add the word and or expulsion. It did just say suspension. But we did add, because of the bullying or the discipline committee's work that they are working on right now, they do have potentially in levels 4 and level 5 that expulsion could happen at that time. So it says suspension and or expulsion. So that was some different language that we added. Okay, so any questions in regards to updating the policy?
Thank you. So through this, it mentions, you'll go to the KSDE prevention resource kit, or can we set the policy to where it is USD-457's policy, or does it have to refer on it? Because as Kansas changes things, that means ours changes, right? If we have that in here.
If I'm hearing you correctly, if within that prevention language, it says that we will use some of KSD's resources to help with that. Yes, so as theirs change, where you go to find that information on their website, as it changes the policy, ultimately, it's the prevention policy, not the what you can and can't do, but the prevention part of it, yes, that would change, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes, as it changes, technically our policy changes.
Yeah, the resources that go to that part, yes.
And then, I guess I feel like all students can be bullied, no matter what their social status or the color of their skin or their sexual orientation. So I'll be honest, I have real concerns with number 8 in this.
I did not bring a copy with me, so I don't have that numbers memorized.
But it talks about not focusing, but looking at, or I don't know if it's collecting data or focusing more on certain groups based on their skin color or their social economic or maybe even special education. I can't remember which all. Yeah, I was trying to bring it back up on here. I printed it out and I left it at home.
My understanding is that is to make sure that certain groups aren't disproportionately bullied versus others. So we would have to keep track of the types of bullying that was happening and what were they being bullied for, and making sure that our prevention plan protects students in higher targeted groups.
So I think bullying is an issue and we need to look at it, but I don't think we should predetermine who gets bullied. Because I know probably people that don't fall under this get bullied on a regular basis. So that's just my opinion.
So I will jump in there just a little bit on that piece. So at the end of the year, our principals are required to turn in discipline data, and there are specific areas that are required. So some of those may be addressed in that policy. I don't have it in front of me either. I don't think, maybe it's down here.
Required by the state?
By the state. So it will say if it's bullying racial, if it's bullying sexual, if it's bullying, and that there are certain categories that we have to respond on. But I agree with you, Cammie, it can be anything, but there are other categories for bullying as well. There's several in our system. So they may not be, there's also a generic bullying, like how many numbers did you have in your building, that at the end of the year, the principals have to report on, but then there are also specific categories that the state documents.
I don't think it's saying that other groups aren't bullied. It's just saying that certain demographic groups are disproportionately bullied at a higher rate. So I don't think it discounts other groups being bullied. It's just saying that statistically in the data that is provided shows that certain of these are bullied at a higher rate.
It's very divisive to have that kind of language.
The words that concern me is developing cultural awareness and understanding that. Who is developing that and understanding it? Are we collecting data on that and giving that to the state and they're giving us direction on that? Or is that something that's being implemented into our curriculums? I mean, I don't know if that's where your concern's coming from, but that's where it could be decisive to me. Just if that's in our policy and we're developing cultural awareness, which is important, is it being done in a positive manner or in a decisive manner where we're making one group feel like, well, you're the bullies all the time based on your demographic, or you're being bullied, or you're going to be the victim because of your demographic. Does that make sense? The negative side of it.
Our interpretation, again, it's an interpretation, so there's we would have to probably lean on council to give us a further direction. But our interpretation of that policy would be based on the collection of our data. We would have to look at which groups are being disproportionately bullied against and provide prevention strategies to help us become more culturally aware, to be sensitive of those needs of groups that are potentially disproportionately bullied against. It's not saying that certain groups are just by nature. It would be based on the data that we collect through the CAN-DIS model and through our bullying referral program, that if we are seeing things that are disproportionate, then we would provide work through our SEL curriculum to provide the opportunities to be culturally aware of which groups are being more targeted. It would be very much similar to the business world of all of a sudden we've had so many referrals of X type of harassment. Now we're going to have a training on that to prevent us from having that again. So it's not saying it's going to be done ahead of time. We're going to look at the data to support what training would be needed. But that's our interpretation of what that policy is
And
stating.
there would be a process on what types of training is given. And
Correct. It would be all through our SEL curriculum that's approved by the board and through the district. So it wouldn't be an additional piece. It's what we would already have in place. Leader in Me, Second Step, Character Counts, the CC framework. I'm trying to think of the other SEL programs we have. Second Step. So all the ones that are already in place, we would just be using those to help with that prevention process.
I agree with you on that. makes me uncomfortable.
I think number 8 is somewhat covered in number 6 and number 7. Not being
Tracking the incidences, you mean? Is this one we're approving tonight, or we're just asking?
And-
That's what I thought.
Is some of this provided by KSB and
Everything outside of 3 words was from KASB's recommended language that they released in June of 21. So we added unwanted in the very first paragraph. We added persistent in the same paragraph, and then we added and or expulsion in the discipline side. Those were the only language changes that we did not take anything out. We just added those into the recommended policy from KASB.
So would 8 read better if instead of saying developing cultural awareness and understanding that certain demographic groups, to developing cultural awareness and understanding if certain demographic groups, or changing the word that to if? Because Jackie, I think that goes along with 6 and 7 are really about what you're monitoring, and then 8 is really, if I'm hearing Jason correctly, that's really how you're reacting, how the district reacts to the data.
It's a mechanism for you as a board to ensure that there are prevention policies in place that are affecting the data that we collect. So however you would word 8 would be just the part of the prevention plan that would enact training for students and or staff, depending on where the incidents are coming from. That's our interpretation. I just want to keep saying that's our interpretation. I'm in no way a legal scholar that's giving you direct answers. I'm just giving you our interpretation as a committee.
That's one I would want to look at, try to
The thing is,
find some better wording.
the thing with these though, in my opinion, as well, is that it doesn't identify either one. So sex, for example, could be any sex, disability could be any, whether you have them or don't, socioeconomic could be rich, middle, or low socioeconomic, religious beliefs could be any religious, gender identity and expression could be any, it doesn't
I know.
spell out anything. It just says it could be any people, anybody, right?
So why do we need it if it's anybody?
Because these do differentiate. So if you are a man, or if girls are being bullied, then disproportionately, according to the data, then you might want to do a practice on girls, or, so it's just laying out the different areas, but I don't think it's being descriptive enough to like leave out anybody. Does that make sense? So, because otherwise how would we identify the training that is needed, or the awareness that we need to provide if we don't have some descriptors or some boundaries to then even collect that data? You know what I mean? So how would they collect that data if they don't have these areas to be collecting from, I guess is what I'm trying to say too. So, I mean, if we just I don't know what we're asking. I guess I don't know what part of it we would change, because it does give, I mean, I could see the if, but it doesn't change. I think what you were saying is divisive, because you feel that
I think it
these terms are-
predetermines who's bullied, and I feel like anybody, that any student, no matter what color, no matter what sexual orientation, can be bullied. So I don't understand why we have to put this in there if we have a zero tolerance policy. And here's laid out, if you bully, this is what you're gonna happen to you.
Yeah, but how are they gonna collect that data without?
Because it's surely when you are tracking it, it's, but I don't.
It could be in here that the data will be collected, but not necessarily having to I want to teach, I want kids to learn to be respectful and nice to everyone.
Exactly.
And the wording of develop, and understanding others people's culture, I get that too, because we all have different backgrounds and come from different settings. I think that's important. But again, I want it to be done in a positive manner and not coming out of bullying where there's a bad guy and a good guy.
But any particular issue does have to have some parameters around it, because if you're talking about the different things that might affect a woman or a girl, let's say, it's gonna be different than things that might affect a boy. Some things are gonna be across the board, but some things are not. And you do need, I mean, you can look at these as anything, categories, descriptors, parameters, boundaries. I mean, I don't really know the correct terminology in this case, but I'm just saying, I get what you're saying in terms of, we just want to teach people to just flip and don't bully, like, period. But there are some, that's why they even had to put the different types of bullying. So there's cyberbullying, there's verbal bullying, obviously there's physical bullying, there's lots of different kinds of bullying. And sometimes we have to address each of those types. You have to get more specific, so that way you're giving people the right vocabulary, the right tools to address those issues. Yes, in general, hopefully via CHAMPS or via whatever programs every school has, they're teaching kindness, but you do at some point have to be more specific when you're trying to educate kids.
Do you think everybody turns people in equally amongst all of it?
No, absolutely
No.
not.
So our tracking is gonna be skewed in that way.
Absolutely. All data is skewed that way though. And so you
But it
have
will
to,
be, because there's a lot of kids don't turn it in and they don't track it. So I would like a policy that is all encompassing.
Nobody should have to be another. In the other category.
but what's an other? I don't understand what that means. This doesn't say that, it doesn't say that boys don't get discriminated or don't get bullied or just girls get bullied. It doesn't say low income people get bullied and high income people don't get bullied. I mean, it's not saying, it's just trying to give parameters of the different areas of bullying that exist. I'm just saying, I don't understand.
And there's,
Yeah, we can definitely disagree to disagree. I don't think it needs to be taken out, and I honestly don't want it taken out because I feel like it gives direction and parameters and boundaries, and it's recommended by KSB, so it's not something that's just a local, there's lots of eyes on it. So I don't want to take it out.
Maybe it could be reworded differently to be more inclusive of everybody, because I would be willing to contact KASB and KSDE and double check language requirements, because many of these are the areas that are required for us to report. And so if there's a legalese reason that we are required to report in this manner, maybe we need to answer those questions before we decide to change the language, and I'd be happy to do that research.
I appreciate that. I feel like we're kind of stuck on that one and more information would help. And looking at yes, we have to collect the data. What else is required in that statement that needs to be in there and what doesn't?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And the basis of all of our policies that we have are based on KSB's language recommendation. That's every policy we have comes from there. And that's the basis of it.
Which is important, and I respect their recommendations because they have long history of that, but also sometimes one district may have a little bit of different of a need than another, so a slight change of wording might.
Absolutely, just sharing for all the board that
Right.
all of our old historical, everything we have is really based on that information.
Thank you for doing that. Nope, that's just new business, so we don't have to do anything on that.
Ratification of the negotiated agreement.
First of all, I'd like to just recognize the team members that we had for the GCA group. Ronnie Knight, head negotiator for the teachers union, is here, so thank you for being here tonight. But we also had Lindley Anderson, Michelle Byer, and Mark Russo. on GCA's team from the board, Jennifer Stanley, president, and Mark Rude. And then Colleen Dries and I participated in that. Really good experience. I think this is maybe a world record in terms of going through the process. I'll get into a little more detail with that in a second, but I think we had 3 actual meetings, 1 to kind of come to a tentative agreement, so 4 total meetings. And I feel like we got a lot accomplished during that time. The board has had this information in front of you, so I'm not going to go through all of these points. I'm just going to kind of hit on the highlights, maybe the ones that are important for the public to hear as well. Colleen and Dr. Carlin addressed where we're at in terms of compensation, continuing with our steps in columns, longevity, the increase to health insurance, premium pay was another big piece of that that we talked about and got to. There was a lot of sections in there that we dealt with language changes, and I'm not going to go through and update the board on those.
Can you hit on the premium pay piece?
You bet. So premium pay, so with our financial position that we were at, we were able to maintain with some of those projected cuts that we talked about. Maintaining that salary steps and columns is vital. In upcoming years, if you ever get in that situation again, it's good to keep that salary schedule healthy. The board has done a really excellent job over the past years to put money on the base of that salary scale. That's really important, and you are able to do that with the health insurance compensation. Both of those pieces are important. But not being able to add to the base this year, we took some ESSER dollars, we set those aside, and we were able to provide our employees with a premium pay. So there's a little bit of discrepancy. People that are hired for the 22-23 school year, they're going to have a different amount. They're going to get $1,000 premium pay for those new employees. But people who are currently employed with us moving forward, they're going to get $1,900 in terms of premium pay. And again, it's one-time money. It's ESSER dollars that we're able to do that with, and grateful to have it. Again, language changes. We talked about extra duty, and there's a lot of language changes kind of surrounding that, updating our contract language that we haven't used in the past. This PowerPoint actually went out to all the staff. We had an informational meeting just to talk about what was done, what the work was done. And so then after that meeting, we sent this out to everyone. Supplemental salaries, we just updated the board over the course of the year, had approved some programs. And again, we needed to update those in the contract. So we did that. The hours and amounts of work is the big piece that we've been hearing about for a number of years, essentially the calendar. And so we spent quite a bit of time on that. And this is kind of the summary of the changes. Currently in our contract, we have 50 minutes before and after school time that is really defined. 30 minutes before school, 20 minutes after, and that's contract time. We've reduced that from 50 to 40. And we also provided some flexibility, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And then in addition, we added 20 minutes of student instruction time to our day, so lengthening the day by 20 minutes. And then we reduced our overall calendar, which again was part of the goal, hearing it from the community, hearing from our staff members, was that we were going to school too long, just too many days. So we reduced that by 6 days. 5 of those will be student contact days, and 1 will be a professional development day. The overall kind of concept of that additional 20 minutes is really to have more academic achievement. Last year, the proposal was similar, but not the same. Last year, we actually built in, we didn't address the 50 minutes, it stayed the same. We did add 20 minutes as one of our proposals, but we wanted to keep that in an isolated block. We talked to administrators about that, how to use it. Would you see this being valuable for your school? And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. Implementing that was a little bit more difficult. So this piece, just to focus on academic achievement, really gives our administrators flexibility so that they can look at their individual buildings, look at that data piece, and what is it that we need to attack in our school. Maybe it is something that you keep in a 20-minute block. Maybe they reallocate a schedule and do it for a longer period of time in order to address interventions, as an example. So what does that change? It took our 40 minutes of instruction time that we currently have. It'll change that to 420, but it does reduce the total number of days for students from 174.5 days to 169.5 days. The contract time, or the contract days that teachers have, It currently is a 7.5 hour day, goes to 7 hours and 40 minutes. Because again, we change it from 50 to 40, and it reduces the overall contract days that a teacher has from 184.5 to 178.5 for contract days. So we wanted to show, again, part of our learning when going through this process last year, really wanted to show what that meant, what the impact was. So this table was included. Table on the left is what we currently have in our calendar, 30 minutes before, 20 minutes after. Instruction minutes are 400. We have 450 of our total contract time or our contract minutes. Student days are 170.5. Parent-teacher conference days, there's 4. But those 4 days are actually, they count in our overall calculation of student contact. We get a 1-to-1 count, even though kids aren't necessarily sitting in chairs. We're able to count that for our hours, for our calendar from the state. We have 6 in-service days, 4 work days, total days, again, that's contract days is 184.5, and our total instruction hours is 1,184. So the table on the right or the right-hand column, the 25 and 15 was just an example. So when we changed that from 50 to 40, again, those are clearly defined and have been forever and ever. That's every employee, every school. So as part of that kind of retention mindset, providing some flexibility, we know that daycare issues are happening around town. There could be start time differences. Somebody that has a child that's in an elementary, but they teach in a middle school, there's different start times, and getting kids dropped off and picked up sometimes are challenging. So we provided some flexibility to our administrators. So it's 40 total minutes is how we were writing that into the contract. So an administrator has the flexibility to front load, if you will, if you have a group of people and they're going to be there in the morning, they're not having these drop off things. So maybe they're doing supervision in the morning, and the majority of that time could be 30 minutes as an example, could be before, but then they only have to stay 10 minutes after. So it's just a total time. But it is providing flexibility to the administrator. It could be that everybody in the building is 20 and 20, but they'll have that own flexibility to work with their employees. So we think that's a plus. Instruction time again goes from 4 to 420. The contracted day 450 to 460. There's the math. It goes through and reduces all those days for you. But the piece here at the bottom where you look at total instruction, currently we have 1,184 hours of instruction. That will go up to 1,204, but there's a little caveat there. So it's actually going to be 1,200 minutes that will report to the state. The reason for that is our first half day that we've done for a long time doesn't include all kids. Elementary kids go, and then every kid that's new to a level goes on that first day. But because we don't require all kids to be there, then we don't get to count those hours in our state calculation. So the actual reporting hours to the state will be 1,225. We did talk to some surrounding schools and just to see, are we in the ballpark? What does their day look like? And that's maybe one of the misleading pieces when you start looking at calendars and why this school goes more than other schools. Length of day is really the difference maker. And so we talked to Holcomb just to see what their overall instructional time was. We're going to report 1,200, and I think we're within 2 hours of what they are. Their actual day from our current schedule, they go to school 30 minutes longer than we do based on what our current schedule is. So with this change, Holcomb will still be 10 minutes longer, and our instruction hours will be relatively close. One other change, there was kind of 3 changes that were a difference from last year's proposals that were unsuccessful to this year's. The 50 minutes to 40 minutes was one, having that flexibility. The 20 minutes was the same, but the other piece was 2 other pieces. One was 5 days last year in reduction of overall calendar. This year it's 6. And then also the total contract hours that we had. Last year we didn't make it equal, kind of through our discussions, negotiations. We got close. I think we ended up being 7 hours longer with contract time. And this year you can see it's reduced 1383.75 to 1368. So we're actually reducing our total number of days, and we reduced that in terms of contract hours, even with the addition of the 20 minutes. So total contract time also went down. If the board ratifies this, sorry, it's small, a little harder to see, but if the board ratifies this, this would be the recommendation for the calendar. Essentially, you approved a calendar early in the school year, and the start date is on the 10th of August with the approved calendar. And so everything basically gets pushed back a week. So it will go, the start date is currently approved for the 10th. It'll move to the 17th. Everything kind of shifts back. Also on the April 7th date, which was Good Friday, we had that originally as a professional development day, and it's now a non-contact day. So a 4-day weekend around Easter. And that would be the calendar that we would recommend to the board. So again, there'll be lots of language changes that we'll go through. That process we go through, we'll update it through my office, and then we get together as a team, make sure that we've caught all those kind of language changes. Team being Ronnie and I probably, but her team as well, just putting more eyes on it. So we'll go through and do that. Another thing we tried to do is just, again, provide some more flexibility. There was a section on leave and adoption. It was pretty restrictive, and so we wanted to make that more conducive to our employees. So we changed some language to kind of free that up a little bit. There was a word in our resignation section that we removed as well. And then the last piece of this was our evaluation tools. We probably have in the neighborhood of 19 different evaluation tools that we use. Last year, we updated our teachers to mimic the language that we're using for acceleration. There was 4 key points of that. Jason mentioned them earlier. And so we implemented that last year in the teacher tool. We also changed last year in all of the tools. There was a piece in there about student achievement goals. So this year, we took those 4 key principles again, and any tool or any place in that tool that it fit, we updated. We have an evaluation committee that went through and did that. And so these are the language changes for those tools that it impacted. Not every one of them got changed. And then the big piece of this, Dr. Carlin kind of led me into this with his discussion with state funding. There's been years past where we're at this time of the year like we are now, and we still don't know what our funding looks like. But with the Gannon case being in place and having a projection of what that should look like in terms of increase for student finance, we feel comfortable with our projection. However, it's still not decided. The governor still hasn't given us a budget yet. So we have a clause in here, both groups understanding that if the budget comes back and it doesn't account for those requirements that are set forth in the Gannon case, then both teams have agreed to go back to the table. And essentially that's just covering, we're making these changes, this tentative agreement, based on that assumption that we're going to get the funding that we're supposed to get. If not, we can't afford to do the things that we've talked about. And so this piece of the contract is ratified by the bargaining unit and the board. It's contingent on the state approving a budget for the 22-23 school year that provides an increase of student funding outlined in the Gannon case. If the state does not approve a budget that meets the requirement of the Gannon case, both sides will need to reopen negotiations. The big piece here is just, we don't want to sit around and wait. We're anticipating that this is going to happen the way it's supposed to. And if so, and the board ratifies this tonight, then we're done. Otherwise, we sit and wait. People are gone for the summer when the contract would be final, and just it muddies things up by quite a little bit. So we're all comfortable. Both sides are comfortable. The teachers voted last week. We had we had an informational meeting Wednesday night. There was probably 20.
I was gonna say 20 to 30.
20 to 30 people that attended that. Essentially, we go through the PowerPoint, answer any questions that they might have. And as soon as that meeting is over, then we push this information out, make it available to all of the voting members, the bargaining unit. And then we opened the vote that night, Wednesday. It was open all day Thursday, and it closed at 1 o'clock on Friday. And the vote passed. We had 305 total votes. We had 200 in favor of accepting this, and we had 105 vote no. So it's our recommendation to the board that you ratify the contract for the 22-23 school year. Questions?
I do have a question regarding the calendar. So normally when a calendar is brought to us, it goes through a process, it goes through the committee. And that is not what happened here, right? We kind of just manipulated the calendar to fit like the new negotiated days. And I feel a little bit apprehensive about that because I feel like we kind of got called out when we skip a process that we normally do.
Sure.
I appreciate the work that you all have done. That's the thing that concerns me is because we have so many, I guess I hate to skip through that process because the calendar is it's a big district thing. And I feel like we've responded to some of the things just in general, like what you said.
Sure.
The days, start times and things like that, which makes me very happy. But I am apprehensive and I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it because we skipped that part of the process with this.
Can I jump in a
It's
second?
not something we've done in the past with negotiated agreement.
Yeah, and I think, Dana, that's probably because we don't typically add or remove days. The last time we did that, we were adding days and we actually put the add off for a whole year. I think, I don't know that I would say that we skipped the process because we went through the process. And the fact that negotiations has looked at it and kept essentially the same calendar, but just simply said, let's push everything back a week. Let's pick one of the PD days and take that off. And so for this year, I mean, they're making some assumptions, but when the district does the calendar next year, you'll be right back to doing the calendar process. So if there's something different that needs to be in the calendar for the following year, if there's another way to approach this, I think, this doesn't eliminate the calendar process forever. And the board, you ultimately have the authority to set the calendar. I think it's great that, normally we respect the recommendation that the calendar committee gives. And if we were adding days, there's probably a better case to say, we need to be careful about how we're doing that. But I don't think too many people are going to complain about shortening the days, shortening the calendar and having fewer days.
I'll just add a little more to that. So when we looked at it, we're, in some years you're kind of at the burden of how the days fall. But this year we're getting out relatively early with the board's approved calendar that we already have. So the backside of that seemed to be taken care of. So our group really talked about, so where does it make sense? Does it make sense to take it off the backside even more, or does it make sense to start the school year later? And because of the way the calendar is that you've already approved, it made more sense to the group to do that. But again, I agreed with Dr. Carlin that, that process was in place and that original calendar, it did get vetted, recommended by the calendar committee. So it was fairly easy to push that back. And that's in conjunction with some of the feedback that you would have seen through that calendar committee process. One of those requests, that was repeated over and over was to start a little later. So that was something that we were able to do based on that.
And I do appreciate that.
Sure.
Fully. I just feel like some of the comments that I get is that we have so many teachers that aren't part of the bargaining unit or don't have that ability to be a part of that process, or I guess I shouldn't say they don't have the ability because it's a choice. And so that does concern me if my fellow board members feel comfortable like that. I mean, I do think it's well done. That is just my concern. I feel like we have been called out when we don't follow past processes, but this is different. That we have not done this before. I'm just expressing a level of I just want to put that out there.
I do have a question on who was able to vote on this?
The bargaining unit, any teacher, there's a few exceptions, like our long-term subs are not part of the bargaining unit. Teachers that are retired, rehired are not part of it.
But anyone that's
Anybody covered under this contract gets to vote on it.
and who can attend the meeting?
Anybody.
It's just,
And
I'm asking more for clarification. I know the answer,
Yeah,
but.
anybody is welcome to attend. We made multiple Zoom meetings via COVID, just because the the amount of people that were on there and getting people to talk over, you know, a one-on-one setting like Zoom was difficult, but pre-COVID, there's years where we have one informational meeting and then it goes to a vote. So that's a similar process when Zoom wasn't a factor.
The responses,
Say it
what
again.
are the responses that you got back
300 total votes.
compared to years previous?
I didn't look, but I would say it's probably relatively close.
Time frame that you had from Wednesday evening to Friday, that's a typical.
Typically, yes, because again, we're usually taking a board meeting and backing it up, you know, and when we can bring that information to the board.
And they're notified to their email to that, or how are they notified?
Voting took place via email. Yes, ma'am. So they would have had the PowerPoint and then a link to vote as well. And all that Ronnie works with personnel and gets all the people that are eligible to vote their emails, and then she builds the voting mechanism that they send out. It's a GCA vote.
And I wasn't trying to contradict you, because
No,
I agree with
I
you.
don't
I've heard concerns that there's teachers that feel like they're not represented because they're not necessarily part of GCA. That is also a choice, so that's a challenge there. But I just want to express,
Vote on the.
but they get to vote on the.
I just want to clarify one thing. Mr. Hogan talked about the flexibility with that 40 minutes before and after school. The principal does still have to make sure that the building is supervised appropriately. So that is not completely teacher choice. Okay, I'm sure they'll work with teachers to try to accommodate them as much as they can. But for example, in our elementary schools, most of our classroom teachers, they walk their kids out and they meet parents after school. So that needing somebody to do that, depending on the age of the kids, is probably going to be a priority. But they will have the flexibility to make adjustments where they can. And but that is something that the principal will have to be able to make that decision.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
I will say this was my first time to sit on this committee, so I can't compare it to other things, but I thought there were good discussions and it was a good process.
Thank you.
Helps me understand the contract better, so.
I'll let you guys vote, and then I'll make my comment when you're done.
Pressure.
So we are gonna go ahead and.
Yes.
Okay, thank you much.
If the board is comfortable.
Are you comfortable? Okay. Madam President, I move we ratify the 2022-2023 negotiated agreement and approve the revised 2022-2023 school calendar.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed.
Now, can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
So just a really big thank you to our negotiations team. When we make these changes, obviously none of them are perfect for everybody. And but the group works to come up with compromises and solutions that are better in the overall picture. And listening to how the process went this year, I think it was more collaborative than it's been for a while. I think the package that is ultimately approved is one of the better packages we've been able to do in my time as superintendent. And I think it's addressed a lot of the concerns and needs that we've heard of. And so again, it's that spirit of collaboration, and that starts with those 8 people coming to those meetings and that table, with that being a priority, and nobody walks out of there feeling like, hey, we got everything we wanted, or we've fixed every issue that we've got, but we've made things a little better is the hope. So, again, just kudos to the team for the time and the work that they put into it, because it is a little bit of good news that it's not June and we're done. So, and that's good for everybody. So
Thank you. And it is a sacrifice for those folks. It's Friday nights, late, all these Saturdays, so it's great.
Some discussion. Volunteers.
Just, there's a lot going on here at the end of the school, and I appreciate the people that came in to answer all the questions that we have. As we go into it, it really helps to hear more information, so we feel like we are making the best decision. It's not that we don't trust any of the recommendations, it's just we have a duty to teachers, we have a duty to students, we have a duty to parents, and we have a duty to taxpayers. And the more information we can have to help make that decision better. So thank you.
I would just say we've attended our first graduation, which was always a lot of fun at GC Achieve. So I appreciate all the people that took the time to make that a really nice ceremony, and just really fun always to see the parents and kids and excitement for that. So that was fun, and we'll look forward to GCHS coming up. And if anybody gets a chance to attend retirement receptions, I encourage people to do that because you really get to experience the heart and soul and dedication. Oh man, it's like end of school year. I just like choke up. But that our staff really do put in and give. I attended Mrs. Solis's, and her daughter was there. Well, her kids were there, and she said, you know, there were times when my mom wasn't at home because she was at work, and yet she still went into teaching. And so that is just an amazing legacy. So I was really felt honored to be a part of that celebration for Mrs. Solis because she has impacted a lot of people, as do many of our teachers and staff. So if you have an opportunity, most of those are open to the public. I think they all are, right? Retirement receptions, I really encourage people to try and attend those. Yeah, there is a lot going on, and I appreciate all the hard work and stamina that you guys have, because I know my kids are like spent. So I hope they're not misbehaving too badly at school. So I just appreciate what you guys do, and you know, praying for you that you don't have any major issues by the end of the school year. And you know, it's really challenging sometimes to be on this side of the table. It's hard to have coherent discussions when you are brought different issues that you haven't had time to think about. I'm not a public speaker by nature. I really hate public speaking, and I just want, sometimes you make mistakes, you say things you don't articulate well up here. And you know, at the last board meeting, I talked about how imperative it is that the board gets me information in a timely manner, and the board does get information in a timely manner almost all of the time. And so I don't think I articulated that well last time when I said that out loud. So I just want to make sure that it is known that I feel like our administrative, our teachers, everybody that we ask for information from typically does their best, their very, very best to get us the information that we need to feel comfortable with the decisions that we make. So I appreciate people that come and speak, because I know that you're speaking for other people. It's a lot of times not your own opinion. And so I do appreciate your bravery to come and talk with the board. I appreciate people that send us emails and texts when they don't have time. I myself, I know I try to respond, but I don't always get to the responses in a timely manner. So I just appreciate people's patience. We're all learning up here, whether you're a new school board member or an old school board member. There's just so much to learn all the time. So I appreciate just the support that we do get from the community, teachers, staff, administration, and I just appreciate your patience to understand that this isn't something that you're necessarily good at. We're just trying to do the best that we can. So thank you.
Yes, everything you just said. I'm just gonna
Ditto.
go with that. Yeah. Because my brain is tired, and so I don't know how teachers and staff are surviving the end of the year, because I'm just in the parent role. But I'm gonna plug the girls soccer a little bit. They have their last home game tomorrow night, senior night. And we have several teams that left for World Robotics yesterday and today. So that's that's where I'm headed tomorrow. I'm just excited for all those opportunities and successes we have for our district. So thank you for all the teachers and parents and staff that support those programs. But if you have an open evening, go watch our girls play soccer tomorrow night because it's been a good season so far. So I know there's lots of other sports activities going on right now, and I've been trying to follow them all, but I can't list them all at the moment. So lots happening. And I'm looking forward to having a successful end of the year.
I'm not near that good of a speaker, so I will mimic everything that they said. And we've had a very busy last few months and a lot of information, a lot of changes. I think we're all looking forward to summer and moving on with changes and new curriculums and a normal school year, hopefully. And lots of good people leaving and lots of good people coming.
Harlan.
Staff appreciation dinner also is the 19th, I think at 5 o'clock. So if you don't have that on your calendar, if you have room, squeeze that in. And we hope we have a great turnout from staff. It's been a couple of years since we've done that event, so it'll be nice to get back in the swing of doing things. I'm going to reiterate a couple of things that Dana said. The GC Achieve graduation, that was great. We graduated more students this year at GC Achieve than we ever have between Achieve and the virtual school. And I don't know, I heard the commencement speaker was dynamite. And the high school's graduation, that's always a great time. So looking forward to that. A little schedule change. It's going to be at 10 o'clock in the morning instead of in the afternoon. That's something I think Mr. Nordby had a lot of feedback from over that. If we're looking for positives out of COVID, I think maybe that was something that, you know, he's heard some feedback. So we're giving that a try and we'll see how that works. And then to end on a little sad news, and I'm sorry to have to do this, but we learned over the weekend that Chuck Stone's passed away. And so it looks like his funeral will be at 2 o'clock on Friday.
Yes.
Do we know where?
I think I know where. Don't know where, sorry.
Well, when we know, we'll get some information out on that. Mr. Stones was assistant superintendent when I came to the district, and he was only in that role for a couple of years before he retired, but didn't take very long, and you learned an awful lot from Chuck. And one of the most important things was just what it means to be an outstanding person. So he's going to be missed. I know his family's going to miss him. He's been a great legacy at Charles Stone's Intermediate Center, and he has meant a lot to a lot of people. So he will truly be missed. But he also led an amazing life. So
It is at the Methodist Church.
at the Methodist Church, 2 o'clock on Friday. Great, thank you.
The next board meeting will take place on Monday, May 23rd at 6 p.m. in the board meeting room.
President, I move we adjourn.
I'll second. Say aye.
Aye.